This episode is brought to you by Thorn, and I have some incredible news for any of you that are in the military, first responder, or medical professions. In an effort to give back, Thorn is now offering you an ongoing 25% off each and every one of your purchases of their incredible nutritional solutions. Now, Thorn is the official supplement of CrossFit, the UFC, the Mayo Clinic, the Human Performance Project, and multiple special operations organizations. I myself have used them for several years, and that is why I brought them on as a sponsor. Some of my favorite products they have are their Multivitamin Elite, their Whey Protein, the Super EPA, and then most recently, Cinequil. As a firefighter, a stuntman, and a martial artist, I've had my share of brain trauma and sleep deprivation, and Cinequil is their latest brain health supplement. Now, to qualify for the 35% off, go to thorn.com, thorne.com. Click on sign in and then create a new account. You will see the opportunity to register as a first responder or member of military. When you click on that, it will take you through verification with GovX. You'll simply choose a profession, provide one piece of documentation, and then you are verified for life. From that point onwards, you will continue to receive 35% off through Thorn. Now, for those of you who don't qualify, there is still the 10% off using the code BTS10, Behind the Shield 10, for a one-time purchase. Now, to learn more about Thorn, go to episode 323 of the Behind the Shield podcast with Joel Totoro and Wes Barnett. Welcome to the Behind the Shield podcast. As always, my name's James Gearing, and this week it is my absolute honor to welcome on the show retired veteran firefighter, chief, and the man behind on-scene training, Aaron Heller. Now, in this second conversation, we discuss a host of topics, from the evolution of the fire helmet, PFAS, vetting safe and realistic fire training, the 24/72 firefighter work schedule, the recruitment crisis, volunteerism, and so much more. Now, before we get to this incredible conversation, as I say every week, please just take a moment. Go to whichever app you listen to this on, subscribe to the show, leave feedback, and leave a rating. Every single 5-star rating truly does elevate this podcast, therefore making it easier for others to find. And this is a free library of well over 1,000 episodes now. So all I ask in return is that you help share these incredible men and women's stories so I can get them to every single person on planet Earth who needs to hear them. So with that being said, I welcome back onto the show, Aaron Heller. Enjoy. Well, Aaron, I want to start by saying thank you so much for coming back onto the Behind the Shield podcast today.
Well, thank you for having me back. It's always an honor to be asked to be on any of these types of things, but certainly Behind the Shield means a lot to me. Just seeing the work you do and all the people you've had, it's nice to be a small fish in that really big pond.
Yeah, well, I mean, I am too, and I'm the host, so there we go. All right. Well, just as a kind of, I guess, an initial icebreaker, you were just at FRI yesterday. Talk to me about your experience presenting, but also some of the classes that you actually took as well.
So, yeah, I've been very fortunate. The Fiero group asked me to come in and speak on kind of in their platform. They had a full day pre-con session, and so I was one of 4 in the morning who spoke. Literally the only one who didn't have PhD behind my name. I explained to him I had BS behind my name, and that take it as you wish, you know. But it was really interesting. They are a group who predominantly deals with PPE and also station design. They're very large into that. Nonprofit group, 501c3. The head of it, Chief Totoro, is retired from Charlotte, North Carolina Fire Department. Great people. And I've been going to their conference in Greenville every February or March for the last several years. And last year, the year before, was my first time presenting there. But it's all about learning about our PPE and learning about what's going on with the NFPA stuff, what's going on with innovations and changes, and of course, what are our big concerns, right? PFAS is the big concern. The change in the NFPA 1970 standard is a big concern, and what research is being done. So I had the opportunity to listen to, before I went on in the morning, it was Dr. Brian Orman from NC State, who is a textile guy who is just, and again, these are really good people who are very, very bright, and kind of goes without saying, but they're doing this for the right reasons. They're doing their research and really trying to improve things for us. And I look at it as myself as being an old guy in the fire service, right? I'm in my 41st year overall since I was a junior fireman, and to listen to the innovation and the changes and the stuff that they've seen and where they see us going, it's been pretty cool. So Dr. Orman spoke quite a bit about the testing procedures, talked a lot about the new 1970, what effects we're going to see in the gear itself, in our PPE, with the removal of PFAS and the treatments that we were used to. So his was very interesting, showing different flame tests, showing the absorption tests that they do with different oils and so forth, and water. And I've seen this a couple times, but to see it again and a little more updated was interesting. So that was one. Dr. Stapleton, Heather Stapleton from Duke University, spoke primarily on the health effects and of PFAS, and again the additives in our that were in our gear for the most part. And she was very, very good. And they have to tread lightly with all the litigation going on right now. You can tell that they're dancing a little bit because they can only be so committal. And as they say, there's still a lot of research and testing that must be done, because with different parts of the country, they're seeing different results. And I think that's very interesting. So she really captured my attention. A couple of the people in the audience had asked her, and the moderator of the program, Ron Cooley, asked her, "Can you definitively say it's our gear? Can you say that the PFAS in our gear is what is giving us cancer?" And that's the $1 million question, right? The union pushed it hard, the IAFF pushed it hard, and I understand why, because obviously our cancer rates are up, and when you do your blood work, and I know you just posted yours the other day, and it's frightening. It is frightening when we see where our PFAS levels are. But one of the things that I took from her answer was, one of the big concerns they have is drinking water and your region. And she put up a map which was graphed out with the levels of PFAS that they have found, not the exact levels, but whether it was high or low and so forth, of PFAS in drinking water around the country. And man, that's an eye opener. Now, as she said, this map isn't 100% on the dot because not everywhere has truly been tested as strongly as some places. So Wyoming may not have been tested nearly as hard as Orlando or as New Jersey or as LA or somewhere like that. So I think maybe they still have some work to do on that. But it was very interesting. And do we have reason to be afraid? Damn right we do. We absolutely do. But we can delve into this as we go through this conversation, because it's way more than just what's in our turnout. We have to take a little bit of responsibility as members of the fire service as well. And believe me, I'm 100% guilty of this as anybody. So I think it goes on from there. And the next speaker that spoke before me was Dr. Kessler from UL and through Fire Safety Research Institute. and again, very good explaining their tests, explaining their EV tests, which I thought is probably the biggest thing people are asking about now is, what happens when an EV burns? What's getting on my gear? What could I possibly breathe in? What could I ingest? All those questions. And every internet guru has answers, and they're all teaching an EV class now with probably second, third, and fourth hand facts. So it was very interesting to see that UL's doing the scientific work for this, for us, and on our behalf. He also spoke about SCBAs. They've been looking at SCBA masks, and actually came out with a memo on folks who are still using SCBA masks that meet the older standards and not the newest standard, and the problems with that, and the fact that they're finding that they craze and bubble and fail at much lower temperatures than new stuff. So it was very informative, and I commend Fiero for being a part of this, and really, I think they're driving the bus. I really do.
I think we touched on this in our first conversation, but how much research was done to show that the American firefighter helmet from the 1930s is still technologically superior to any other helmet on the planet? If we're going to talk about science and trust the science, let's throw that into there as well.
I know, and we are. It's funny. I was writing a little chapter for a friend of mine who's writing a book based on my chapter is supposed to be on organizational change, and so I was writing it today actually while my wife was having a medical procedure done. And I was in the waiting room and did a few paragraphs of that, and the old 200 years of tradition unimpeded by progress now maybe worth 250 years. The country's turning 250 next year, so we'll have a wrestling match in front of the UFC fight in front of the White House for that, which would be interesting.
Then we'll go to the new ballroom for aperitif.
Exactly. But I'm certainly going to watch. I mean, it's just history in the making. But yeah, so it's funny you say that, because one of the gentlemen who's very, very involved with the Fiero group, with the NFPA committees on 1970 and several others, is a gentleman named Jeff Stull. Has a long history in the Coast Guard, and he's very, very well spoken and well studied, and has done a lot of good, I think, for the emergency services and what he does. And at the last Fiero conference in, I guess it was February or March, he actually put out a small survey regarding our helmets and our eye protection in our helmets. So, yeah, I mean, it's something to look at. The Euro helmet, nobody wants. I don't want it. Honest to God, I know it's safer for me from what everybody tells me. I'll probably be caught dead if I was wearing it, but it's true. Again, we all have to choose our poison, I suppose.
Well, my thing is, it doesn't have to be the Euro helmet. Make an American helmet. Just make it good. I mean, that bailout that went, viral a couple of weeks ago, the guy, the backdraft in the second floor, and he's kind of lay sideways on the ladder. What's the first thing that fell off? His helmet. Now he's 2 stories up. If he slips head first, he's done. If he had a European helmet on, it would still be on his head. So we cannot deny the fact that they absorb carcinogens in the leather ones. But I mean, I wore the West Coast helmet, which was smaller. And even coming back to the East Coast with the bigger one, I was catching that damn thing on everything. And then you think about the weight of it and all these other things. It's like, that's fine. Don't take the European one then. But for the love of God, come up with something better and call it American at least. But this whole, this is tradition is bullshit. And I'm sure we talked about it the first time. It's not. It's a costume. It's history. History and tradition are 2 very different things. Tradition is leadership and courage and service and camaraderie. That is the history, the culture, the tradition of the fire service. If we're all about, what we look like, then take off your pack, put 3/4 length boots on. You're not allowed to get on an engine, go find a horse, drag some, steamer over there and go put it out while you're sucking air through your beard. Otherwise, shut the fuck up about this whole it's history thing. You want your tick, leave the tick behind if you're not worried about innovation. So I don't know what our obsession is with the helmet when it's the last piece of equipment that we refuse to change, but they're shit because 14 years I wore them myself. They are terrible. And what do we wear in special ops? A different helmet. What do we wear in extrication teams? A different helmet. You know what I mean? So all it is a motorbike helmet. If you own a motorbike, it's the same kind of helmet. You have no problem wearing that. So my thing is, American Fire Service, if you have such an issue with something that's come from another country because your ego hurts too much, then invent your own. But for the love of God, can we please improve it?
I think they are improved. Well, I know there are some companies who are working pretty hard at it. It's kind of interesting because if you look and you start scrolling social media, and I have some friends that are involved in this, and I don't officially take a real strong public opinion either way on it, but there's a lot of companies out there who are now refurbishing helmets, right? And they do very good work. You look at the helmet and it's cleaned up nicely, and it's got a better fit, more comfort, all that. But they've certainly changed the dynamics of that helmet as far as its safety components go. Some of the suspensions have been changed. You don't have ratchet systems in them. A lot of them are removed. A lot of them are actually cutting their brims down a little bit in the back, so you get a little more movement in your neck and your head, I guess is the reason. But now, if we were to get hurt wearing that helmet, where do we stand? I don't know, because pretty sure that NFPA sticker isn't going to matter at that point. So it's certainly something. I know I've worked with one company, one manufacturer, who has come out with two new styles, although they are traditional looking. The fit rides a little bit lower down, but it's still a traditional looking helmet. Now, it's not leather; it's their form of composite and so forth. But the research is there. It shouldn't be that hard to figure these things out. It really shouldn't. And our gear is coming really a long way. The long way from the duck coats and red ball gloves, and hip boots. So it is the culture change that we always need to address it. And you can't, when you're trying to move the culture a bit, you can't do it everybody jump in the deep end at one time. And I think that you need to gradually move to that to avoid the shock and awe, so to speak. But then again, if you shock and awe and that's it, this is what you're going to do, well, you conform or you don't. So I guess there's two sides to that coin. I kind of like easing into things.
Mm-hmm. Well, my thing is this: if we're going to talk about PFAS in our gear, which we should, because for people listening, I posted my blood tests after Cambiotics paid for me to have a PFAS test, and all my levels were off the chart. Then we also have to have a conversation about every other element of our PPE that's detrimental. So a leather sponge that sits on our head, a leather radio strap that goes right across our throat and the thyroid area. These are also things that we need to address. So if you can't decontaminate your helmet, or if we're looking at musculoskeletal injuries, or just simply the ability to crawl through a space after a collapse, we need to be looking at those as well. You can't say, oh, it's PFAS and join a lawsuit and then throw a freaking leather helmet on your head. That's just ridiculous.
Yeah, well, and I don't know if I don't recall if he was on your show or not, but Tony Gillen.
Yes.
So, his helmet saved his life. His helmet in a training incident, had he not had the full suspension and everything in that helmet, his doctor told him, yep, basically he was almost paralyzed from a Halligan falling off a roof and getting him. Had he not been wearing that helmet that met the standard, and I guess God looking over him as well, he would have been paralyzed. So it makes you think. I can tell you, I wear a helmet when I do a lot of the flashover training. So we're doing a lot of that for one of the companies that we work with, and it is not the standard. It's an old Morning Pride Ben 2 that I sent up to Capital City Industries, had him refurbish. It's got a much different liner in it, much different suspension in it. It's lighter. It sits lower on my head. It fits me perfectly. But I'm in a scenario there where I wear that when I'm not working ladders. I'm not in a position where things are going to fall on my head, basically. And a lot of guys I know are in those burns are starting to wear the West Coast style helmet, or even the Philly style helmets, the little turtle shells, because they're lighter. And on the training ground at the end of a long day, if you're wearing a leather helmet for a long time, you've taken a beating. And we can't wear leathers in some of these training facilities we're working in now, because will just destroy that helmet.
Yeah. Well, I think you just underlined two reasons why maybe the innovation is there to progress. Like I've always said, the Navy SEALs don't wear tin helmets for a reason. You know what I mean? They're not worried about how they look. They're worried about if they can kill bin Laden or not. So so progressing a little bit away from that back to the PFAS conversation, I just interviewed Sean Downs, one of the health and wellness chief at DC Fire. Amazing conversation. But he was talking about, a really interesting point is they obviously want to get away from the gear that has PFAS in, but he was saying that the danger is trying to rush it so much that the technology isn't there. So I'm all about innovation, but the example I used with him was the vaccine during COVID. Yes, it would be fantastic to truly have something that would stop the spread and stop you yourself from getting this particular disease. But that wasn't what happened. They rushed it through and it ended up being, nowhere near as effective as they told us initially. And he was saying that some of the demos on the PFAS-free gear that they developed up to this point, the absorption rate was a lot more. And you imagine if you're absorbing hydrocarbons, I think they did one demo and the firefighter went up like a Christmas tree. So not something I witnessed, secondhand information, but obviously Sean, was there in these conversations. So I think this is the other thing that we do have to be careful. And the other side as well is that not to be duped by the chemical companies who change one molecule and call it something else, and you've got the same shit in your gear still. So those are two kind of interesting, things that I've heard out of this PFAS conversation so far.
And he's absolutely right. From all the stuff that I've seen, and I've had the opportunity to work with at least one of the manufacturers very closely, and seen the products from the other manufacturers very closely. He's not wrong. The fact that when you take you take that material and you remove the PFAS, so you're removing what we've been coating it with, so to speak, right? Basically, they're coatings. So when we remove that, the gear, I guess the best way to put it, Dr. Orman put it very clearly. One of the times I heard him speak earlier was, be careful of the devil that you're about to dance with. We knew the one we were dancing with. The next one, we don't know enough about it. In my opinion, we really don't. And just like you said, could they change one or two molecules here and there? And maybe it's not necessarily better. It's not PFAS anymore, which we know is bad, but maybe it could be something else down the road. You're right about the absorption. The other issue for fire departments is going to be your gear is not going to hold up. It's just not. And that was spoken about yesterday quite a bit. And nobody can tell you the straight number. So when I retired from the job, I worked in a very busy place. Guys are putting on their gear a lot in a day. And it takes a beating. And they go to quite a few fires and extrications and just a lot of runs. So they're wearing it quite a bit. That gear, my guess, and again, just an educated guess. I don't have any facts. I don't have research to back myself up. But what I'm seeing is that, what we wanted to be 10-year gear and what we assumed would be 10-year gear, I think you're looking at 3 to 5 year gear. Right? And talking to my friends who are selling gear, that's what they're seeing. They're seeing that in that 3 on gear that's been worn often is going to, and laundered properly often, is going to start to fail. So now it affects everything down the road. It affects budgets. It affects staffing levels. And one of the union guys spoke about this yesterday at the conference. If I have to make a decision between can we get a bigger raise or can we get our second set of gear, I have a dilemma as a union guy. I now have a dilemma. Do they have to cut money out of this to pay for this? So I think it's going to affect the fire service more than we realize and more than the common firefighter understands, because we're not, and these prices aren't going down. They're all going up 15, 20% or whatever it is. It's a problem. And this is generational. This is not going to end now. We're at the tip of the iceberg with PFAS. Now we're going to move forward. You talked about like the saturation of the gear. You're talking about the hydrocarbons that are being sucked into the gear, and can we get it deconned? We can do that if we're doing it the proper way. And then again, you look at a small place like where I volunteer now since I retired, and they're not doing many runs. They're going to maybe do 3, 4, 500 runs in a year. How many times am I actually going to put that gear on? That gear is going to last much, much longer than a busy, ghetto city fire department. So these are all things that are going to affect it. The biggest thing is that, it's the moisture barriers. It's absolutely the moisture barriers. And that's where we are.
I really like the idea, and I don't know if they call them blue gear or not, if I got that right. I remember John Spira talking a long time ago that he was developing one, but I don't know if they ever materialized, but also having a workout set of gear, hopefully a fraction of the price of real bunker gear, simulates the heat encapsulation, the inability to move as well, but it's not ever going to a fire. So a lot cheaper. You don't need to have that, heat resistance at all, but just kind of like a bulky, jacket and pants, so you can simulate, the intensity, the heat. I mean, I've always worked in California or Florida, so today it's 106 outside. So, you have to be doing works, you have to work out in gear, otherwise you would just die. Even in rehab, you can't cool down. So,
right.
I really like that too, because that removes, not only as you're talking about, the use, because I wore the hell out of mine working out, because I had departments where I ran a lot of fire and departments that in 5 years barely even saw a flame. So,
right.
Either way, I'm putting my gear on, whether it's just to pull sleds and carry sandbags around the back, or I'm putting it on for a commercial fire in Anaheim.
Well, and the other thing is, you got to spec your gear for what you're going to do and what you're going to face. So, I see a lot of these gear salesmen, quote unquote, who are really just order takers, and they're selling what they can sell. They tell you buy this spec, and this is a great spec for you. And maybe it's because they got lots of that material and they can make good money on it. Maybe it's because it's all they know, and well, it's just easier than having to rewrite specs for every little department that's buying 4 and 5 and 10 sets of gear at a time. But you gotta build your gear based on your department. And I think that's something that slips. I know my own department, my volunteer department, I don't know that anybody field tested anything or did anything of that nature, but you got to field test. You got to make sure it works for you. I got to do some consulting work recently in a department in the Mid-Atlantic who's getting ready to buy a ton of gear. And we sat down and we went over specs and we discussed new hood designs and so forth. And they are setting it up for them and for the long haul and for their members' health and safety. And their union's involved. Their fire chief is really, really good about it. She's been very open to change and to listening to her members more so than dictating, hey, I'm the fire chief, this is what I want. So I think a lot of it goes into that as well. But again, it goes back to the breathability. It goes back into the thermal protective properties that you need. I know some departments now or some manufacturers who are pushing out it's a much breathable gear, right? It lets the heat out much easier. Well, how much does it let the heat in? Did a burn in Rhode Island the other day for a department, and it was ungodly. We probably shouldn't have even done it. It was so damn hot. Heat index of 110, and we were doing a break-in burn for a new training facility. And after 2 burns, I was done. Whether I'm in shape, out of shape, or whatever, it didn't matter. Even the young kids who were rock star CrossFitters were done. But there was a guy who was field testing a brand new set of gear that Mid-Atlantic area is trying out. And this was for the military. And I said to him, why don't you get up front in the front of the burn can with me? And I'm wearing an older set. It's a 2-year-old set of Morning Pride, but it was designed very, very well for what I do. It's an excellent spec. And he was wearing a different manufacturer. And I said, you want to field test it? This is how you field test it. Get up in here with me and let's see how you feel with it. And literally a couple minutes into the burn, I asked him, you all right? Yeah, I'm all right. Okay. We go back outside afterwards and he's like, holy crap, I got so much hotter in this gear than I did in my other spec. Well, maybe that should tell you right there that, you know what, this might not be the right spec for you guys. And for their application, if you got that hot in what we were doing, what you would be required to do on the real job, not even structural, but other things that this organization is tasked with, that probably ain't the answer. So this could affect firefighter health and safety down the road for a long time, a long time. So, and it's a huge investment. You know, you're talking what for a set of gear now, head to toe, you're anywhere from $5,000-6,000 when it's all said and done. So.
Yeah, exactly. It's funny you say that because my Anaheim gear was by far my favorite, and I, definitely made entry on some barn burners in that. And I remember the next department, Orange County, I forget, but it was a different manufacturer, definitely a different style. And I remember exactly that, like, less hot fires certainly felt hotter, and it was, I never even thought about that. Different manufacturer, different specs. But yeah, I mean, if I could keep that one set, I have got them actually, they're in my garage, but if I've had them my whole career, I would have been so much happier. So yeah, that does make a lot of sense. What about from station design before we kind of progress to your transition and all things, modern day fire service? What are some of the exciting innovations that you're seeing as far as being able to design a station from, ground zero up?
So I haven't been real deeply involved in it, but I certainly am following it. And I looked yesterday, they had some really cool schematics and plans of a bunch of different firehouses that have been built around the country. And I was kind of checking them out at the break. But some of I think the things that we're seeing is obviously the old traditional firehouses are really a thing of the past. We now have bunker gear rooms. So our gear isn't on racks in the middle of the engine room like it used to be, not getting the carbon, not getting all the diesel exhaust, not getting the sunlight, not getting the bad UV that's going to degrade our gear so quickly, which again, without PFAS coatings on that gear, UV is certainly going to affect it more. You're going to see the fading and you're going to see it wearing more. Those fibers are going to take a beating. So I think the lighting changes or something. Obviously, the exhaust systems that are being put in these buildings are different. Decon facilities, even the station alerting systems. They were starting to change those 10, 15, 20 years ago, where you would go from a softer on up to a higher pitched sound and lighting and so forth. And I always thought it was cool, but it was so god dang expensive that I don't know that a lot of people were able to afford to make those changes. But you're seeing a lot more of that innovation now. I can tell you the thing that I think that again, this is an old guy's point of view, but the fact that we have individual bunk rooms for everybody has changed the culture in the firehouse, and I don't necessarily think it's in a good way. I really don't. Not that I want to listen to some bastard snoring all night or a CPAP machine or whatever else is going on, or smell everybody that what they had for dinner. Can you hear that in the background?
I can. Is that the Nazis coming?
Yeah. So I am in Surf City, New Jersey. Speaking of firehouses, on vacation on Long Beach Island, and our house is directly across from the volunteer firehouse here. So apparently they've got. So it'll stop, I think, 3 to 5 blasts, and that's it. But yeah,
it's all good. It just adds character to the conversation, but it does take me back to all the World War II footage, I gotta say.
Yeah. That was a big deal around us. Everybody had a siren or a horn. All the volunteer fire departments around us, and it was funny because oftentimes in certain towns, like the town I grew up in New Egypt, our fire siren would blow like I think it was 5 or 8 times, and the volunteer first aid and ambulance squad siren would blow like 3 times. So it wasn't the same. So you could listen to how many times it went, and you would know who had the run, because this was a time where not everybody had pagers and all that, and they would all just respond to the firehouse. So it's for here, it's kind of interesting because being a shore town and the population is way up with tourists. It gives everybody a little bit of a warning that, hey, there's guys going to be coming in and trucks going out, and be heads up on the street. So I guess maybe that's their theory still. So,
I want to go back to individual dorms, but while we're on this topic, I know that we talked about this, when we last sat down.
Yeah.
One of the things that I find crazy is in areas that aren't remote, where obviously volunteer fire services make complete sense. You're in rural, wherever, population of, 127, but
Right.
especially in the Northeast, where you have, as you mentioned, heavily populated tourist destinations, suburban sprawling neighborhoods. To me, volunteerism is incredible, but this is also a profession where in an ideal world, you have a fully staffed career station that responds immediately, not when they finish their mechanic's job, got in their car, gone to the station, grabbed their gear, and then go to the fire.
Yep.
So what is your perspective on transitioning some of these busy suburban volunteer stations or departments into career and giving these men and women the financial support and the ability to actually make a profession out of it?
It's way overdue. It's number one. I think that there's going to be more and more lawsuits, and there probably should be. And I know this will piss off some people that I say this, because I've been a volunteer at heart since I was a 14-year-old kid. And when I retired from the job, I asked the volunteer fire chief where I live, where in the town I grew up in, and I actually live the next town over now. But I said, Rick, I'd love to hang my gear back up, and I'd love to respond again as a volunteer. I can't make everything. I live a ways away, so I'm going to be making the third truck or whatever. If you do duty crews, I'll come down and ride. But now they have a combination department. When I was there as a commissioner many years ago, I really pushed hard that we at least have a day crew. And I don't see the total need for a night paid crew, but they sure as hell could be putting people in there doing duty crews and making sure they're staffing. And when you can't staff, then it's time to hire. And these people that are skirting this issue, and I understand company pride, and I get it. But Jesus Christ, if it's your family that's trapped on the third floor of that house, and the smoke is pushing, I don't have the time for you to wait, again, to respond from home and have to, get there safely, which a lot of them don't. And it just doesn't make sense. Now, I got a buddy that lives out in the middle of Idaho in the Rocky Mountains. They're never going to have a career fire department where he lives. It's a massive area. It's mostly forest. It's a small town. Totally get it. But when you choose to live there, you make that choice, right? You make that choice that your sheriff's department is only so big and they can only do so much for you, and your fire department can only do so much for you. But when you're in populated areas, you look at Long Island, right? You look at North Jersey and all of New Jersey, really, and most of these places, the taxes that people are paying are exorbitant. And the services they're getting, if they knew the true services they're getting, and it's not to slight the volunteers, because there's some damn fine volunteer firemen, guys who I would rather go to fires with some of these volunteers than some of the people I work with. And that's so it's no slight to the volunteers, but it doesn't compare. And they're being cheated, and we're rolling the dice on their lives. And that's what we're doing. So even if we were paying per diems, or we were putting guys up on duty crews in the firehouses, some of them are starting to go to live-in programs. I know there's several of them in Maryland and Pennsylvania, and I think even here in Jersey, a couple of them on the Jersey Shore are starting to do that. Do it, man. Make the attempt, and let's progress. But if you're not going to staff and you're not going to support them, you're rolling the dice, man, and you can't trust it. Like where I'm at right now, I can look out this window and see, just in my view, probably 10 multi-million-dollar homes that have been built here in the last 5 years that are loaded with tourists, right? That are Airbnb rental. I'm sitting in a rental that my wife and I rent. It's ridiculous. They're not getting the service they deserve. There's no way in hell they are. And we as a fire service, if we're not going to eat a little bit of pride, push a little ego back down, and do the right thing, and we can blame the town administrators, we can blame the government all we want, and that's what we do, right? That's what the union does. That's what we all do. Bottom line is, if we're not willing to bring the problem to the forefront and say to them, our response times aren't as good as they should be, right? This is a pretty good volunteer fire department from everything I can see. They're getting out the door normally in that probably 4 to 5 minute range. For volunteers, that ain't bad. right? But coming from the firehouse I worked in, where the guys would run through there, slide that pole, get on the rig, and be out the door in a minute to a minute and a half, well, 3 to 4 minute difference makes a hell of a difference. So it's time for us to bare our souls a little bit, pull our skeleton out of the closet, admit that, hey, we're not doing as good a job as we could. You as a town or a city administration need to address this, and let's come up with an answer to it together. But if we're not willing to tell them there's a problem, even if they know there is, they're not gonna just offer it up. It's just not gonna happen. At least not in my experience.
Yeah. And this, I mean, I agree completely, even from the career side, which I know we talked about last time we spoke, but, you know, the 2472 that now is really starting to take hold in Florida,
Thank goodness.
that comes out the same thing. Yeah. But I mean, you know, this whole thing of like, we're okay, you know, and I did a presentation a couple of times. I don't normally speak. I'm not a public speaker at all. But when I've done it, there's a slide that says, whose fault is it? And there's a ladder. And the point is, it's all of us, whether you're the firefighter, whether you're the chief, whether you're the city administrator, whether you're the union, none of us have done a good job telling the public what we do, where we are effective, and then where the shortcomings are. And I think this volunteer conversation, it's not a smite to the volunteers, it's the opposite. It's supporting them. You know, having a career force of the people, like you said, that were, you know, better than some of the career firefighters that you work with, you know, having a bar so that we avoid some of these tragedies with volunteer firefighters that, you know, just are not in the physical shape to be doing this job. Let's be honest, there's an issue there. And then the delivery of service, because I mean, there's an easy comparison. Do you have a volunteer police force? Exactly. Then why not?
Right.
You know what I mean? That's it.
Right.
Mic drop. So
and,
of course, again, you know, when you're please.
Goes to tradition, James. It goes right back to tradition. Yeah.
Yeah. If my teenager is bleeding to death in an overturned car, or as you said, my young child is stuck in the attic during a structure fire, do I want those people to go from the mechanic shop to the station, grab their gear, fire up the rig, hope that the air brakes release because they drained, because they haven't been maintained properly, and finally pull out the station to a charred out home or an expired teenager? Or do I want to train a group of highly trained men and women that, I mean, this is my experience in my career too. 60 seconds, you know, you're dressed up on the rig, and then, you know, by that point, your engineer obviously isn't bunkering up and you're already out the door, you know? So yeah, I mean, we were always held to a high standard. So you know, it's a non-argument. If you're in somewhere where you've got the tax base to support it, which I would argue was probably most of New Jersey, and this also applies to our incredible ocean lifeguards that also should have this support, then if we're not prioritizing the incredible life safety, you know, issue that they are the solution to, then we've completely dropped the ball. And like you said, that's not just the politicians, it's all the way down, including the people that we serve need to crack a book and find out what we actually do, and, you know, the impact of our job and the downside of the volunteer fire service. But this is a beautiful opportunity to move some of the volunteer areas that are so densely populated now into the career field. And like you said, using volunteerism to support that, but having a core group of career men and women that do respond the moment the call hits.
Yeah, I agree. I really do agree. And there's some places where the volunteers are still just crushing it. They are, in my opinion, they are the oddballs in reality. But a great example I can tell you, we do a ton of training in Louisiana. And it's weird, right? On-scene training has been around for 20 years, over 20 years. And you always find, I think every training group has an area that people take to them, and they do well with that group. And then word spreads and it just goes. And we've become that in South Louisiana, which is totally weird for a company that's owned by a guy from New Jersey, right? To the point where my son moved to Thibodaux, Louisiana, and is now on the job in Baton Rouge. But that's a great example. So that town of Thibodaux, it's a small city south of New Orleans, about 45 minutes to an hour south. They are so deep in tradition. And I mean, the history of that place and the love of their tradition and the love of their fire service is like I've never seen anywhere in the world. And all the travels I've been to, I've just never experienced it like these guys. And their dedication to training, their dedication to the job, their dedication to their community is truly second to none. And I know it sounds like I'm gushing over these guys, and they have their flaws and they have their problems and they have their inner battles like all of us. But man, they are the one place that I watch do it totally different than the rest of us. So the only ones who go to the firehouse are the chauffeurs or the engineer or whatever, driver operator, picks up a rig, and everybody else is kind of an all y'all, where they're all riding POV to the scene, and everybody meets there. The rig pulls up, they make the hookups, they do their stretches. It's pretty unbelievable to watch them operate, and they do a job as good as most career departments I've seen. But they're the anomaly, truly the anomaly, because they just push themselves so goddamn hard. And I look at my own department and I go, we're not as good as they are. We're just not in my volunteer department. We could be better. And we just have to face the facts of where we're falling down and where we need to be better. And I know it's easy and it sounds like utopian thinking, but God damn, if you got the will, it's not that hard. But it's having the will to take the first step. And man, taking that first step, sometimes you need a foot in your ass to do it. And you don't want it to be when the kid is, like you said, bleeding out on the side of the road or trapped upstairs. And now, oh, we should have been better. We should have done better. And we're going to work on that. Try explaining that to a family, right? It's just like what we see on the news every day when you see somebody who was murdered and they say, crime's not really that bad. Well, maybe it ain't that bad, but it sure as hell is to the family of the kid who just got killed. So there's no excuse. There really isn't. Just you got to have a will. Maybe it's, well, we'll take this conversation where you wish, but I think that's when we can talk more about generational differences.
Yeah, no, we'll jump in that now. I think just to parallel what you're talking about, I mean, for almost 9 years now, I've been talking about the 24/72. Now, my understanding and storytelling has grown with all the guests that have brought all this information, and now we're at the beginning of a revolution here in Florida, and I think it's like Indiana Jones and the boulder. Like, you're not going to get out of the way of it now. It's happening. Yeah. But the number of years I was told, oh, that's ridiculous. Again, oh, that's utopia. I remember my first part-time job. That'll never happen. Where's the money going to come from? We can't even hire now. Everyone told me every reason why it wouldn't work, but not a fucking single person said, let's figure out how we can make this work. Until more recently, some of these fantastic departments like Boynton Beach and Pasco County and Gainesville said, hold my beer. Let's make this happen. And they developed in the meantime relationships with their, with the unions, with the city and county council members. And, lo and behold, when they showed them the money that would be saved as well, this thing turned around. I think that's the problem with the fire service, and which we'll get to, with what we're going to talk about next, is we love to say how it won't work. And I kind of, I call people out. I'm like, well, wait a second. On your Instagram, you've told me how fucking courageous you are. You've got your mustache and your leather helmet and you're doing your duck walk, spinning the hose around, or filming yourself in shorts, doing a door prop, real heroic stuff. Yeah. Where's your courage when it comes to standing up for the things that really matter? Delivery of service, the ability to go home when you're supposed to go home to your family. So this is where I think we're starting to see a turn now, is some of this, ego and narcissism that we've seen on some of the fire influencers, and these loudmouths, that to make me want to throw up, that are all about themselves. It's me. I thought it was supposed to be for them, but it's not. It's you and your Instagram platform and your training, whatever it is. Yeah. And going back to, well, why the hell did you sign up in the first place? It was for other people. And those other people include your wife, husband, children, and going back to them. So I think that getting away from the narcissism and the ego, and then also, I'll be completely honest, the fucking cowardice that I'm seeing in some of our profession, and back to actually simply doing the right thing. Whether you're going and saying, hey, these volunteers need to be paid. Enough is enough. You have a tax base of this many $1 billion, or $1 million, this needs to change. Or, as we're going to get to, that let's put this pride back in the fire service, because the reality is the last 20 years, a lot of our air quotes leaders have completely fucked it up to the point where you have a national recruitment crisis. That's on them. Newsflash. If you were in any sort of leadership position, union, fire, city, county, And we are now at a point where a lot of young people don't want to do this anymore. That is an epic failure, and it's on your shoulders. So I'm excited that we're starting to see it turn around with some of these initiatives. But, people have got to understand that they are responsible for this decline, and we need to do things differently. You can't just beat your chest and say greatest job in the world and not actually put any effort into making it better.
Yeah, and that's exactly right. I was blessed. I came on the job working the Philly schedule. So this was 1990. When I was getting hired, I got offered a job in Hamilton, New Jersey, and Lakehurst Navy Base, where the Hindenburg crashed. And my dad was a Navy guy. I was looking at going in the Navy possibly because I just wasn't happy with a lot of things. And I thought, well, maybe I'll go into service. And he kind of talked me out of that, even though he was in the service. But politically, he did not think that it was a good idea. and he was probably right, because we went to Iraq 2 years later. So, but when I got offered both those jobs within the same week. And Navy Lakehurst was working that old military 24 on, 24 off, 24 on, like never off type schedule. And, you were getting held 72 or 96 straight. And then you would get maybe 24 off, and then you get brought back in. And it was a crazy schedule. And it was making, honest to God, the starting salary at the time was $15,100 a year in 1990. Wow. Right. But hey, we get great medical benefits, is what they told me. And Hamilton called me, and I had tested for them, and they said, so I asked the commissioner who called me, I said, what's the schedule and what's the pay? And he says, it's the Philly schedule. It's 2 10-hour days, 2 14-hour nights, and then you're off for 4 days. Oh, I like that better. 4 days off. That's great. I can work my side gig. My parents own a flea market. My mom still owns it at 90 years old, almost 91 years old, and still runs it. So I could still work out there. Cool. And I was going to get paid $23,000 a year. And I thought, hell yeah, man, I'm going to make $8,000 a year more, work a better schedule. I immediately went to that job, and that's where I stayed until the day I retired. And maybe a third or halfway through my career, we switched to 24/72. Simply because it was the same 4-platoon system, but a lot of our guys who were traveling further said, man, this 10s and 14s suck. I'm driving up and back 4 times, every week. I could do this twice a week and, get my breaks. And at first I was like, man, I don't know if I want to do that. Only 3 days off. I like my 4 days off. And then I realized, wait, if I work at 24, I've got probably a day to recover, 2 days I can work a side gig, and then come right back in rested, ready to go, do what I got to do. It was a no-brainer. So we did it. We took everything we did back then. It was just, we're going to do this on a test basis for 30 days or 60 days. I swear to God, every time we did something, it was for the better, and it never changed. We went from AAAs to flat packs and Minutemans. This is the exact same way. We're going to try these for a month, see if you guys like it. It was done, So I was blessed to work in that 24/72 schedule for the majority of my career. And I reluctantly say this, but I don't know that I felt the kind of angst and other problems that a lot of my peers felt working 24/48s and other shifts from around the country. I've got a lot of friends. We're on scene training. We got like 30 people in our organization and group. Most of them didn't work that schedule. And I saw them going through a lot more shit than I went through. And I now that you, especially with what you're doing and others are doing, to cast light on the importance of getting our sleep and not being deprived and everything that goes with it, that this schedule can afford you. Now I look back at it and I go, I think the schedule is one of the reasons that I was as successful as I was when I was working. Not that I didn't have my issues and my crap, but man, if I was working that 24/48, I might have been an even bigger mess. So, yeah. But again, the union's got to fight. The firemen have to fight for themselves. They can't just eat the shit and say, well, this is what we have to do. I come from a town where we fought the fight and we consolidated an entire fire department. We might not have done it all right, and we've done some things there that I think were total mistakes, and we really screwed some shit up. But in reality, our people came to bat and said, enough. We're going to do this the right way. We're going to protect our citizens better. We want this. And we made some demands, and we won some things, and some things we won we might have lost in the end because we weren't that smart. But you got to take a stand. And if you're not willing to take a stand, as you said, if you gotta man up or woman up or whatever you want to call it. And it's time. It's certainly time with the suicide rates, with the illnesses that we're seeing, with all the divorces that we see, right? All of these things compounded. What's it going to take for people to step up and go, enough's enough, man? This is messed up. We got to change it. And I think the 2472 is a big part of this.
Well, it's funny, even with the PFAS conversation, you notice how quickly unions jumped on that. And I've always said, well, of course you're going to jump on that because you just point your finger at someone else, the gear manufacturers, the foam manufacturers. Now, is it a piece of the puzzle? Yeah, my blood work shows that James Gearing is riddled with PFAS. Mm-hmm. And I'm hoping for everyone listening, Cambiotics is creating a probiotic that we are hoping will remove PFAS from the human body. And I'm going to be a guinea pig, and I hope to be an evangelist for this and help the population. And just as a side note, exactly, this is how, great a company is. They sent me a thing with the map for my home of Ocala saying, by the way, James, this is how many times, 1,000 times more PFAS levels are in your area too. Now, we try and drink spring water, but even then, does the bottle have PFAS in? I don't know. So regardless, and then again, with, if we're talking innovation, the individual dorms, if they are not managed properly, because I think they're fantastic. I mean, why wake up a different, crew that doesn't need to go on the call? But it has to be mandated by, lieutenant, station commander, whatever it is. When you're taking a nap, go into your room. Absolutely. At night, go into your room. But the rest of the time, communal areas. Because I agree, that can be the death of a crew if you're just hiding in your dorm. So that can be managed well as well. But yes, a lot of these innovations, I think are really important. But going to the cancer thing, in my mind, I got lost and I'm circling around now. In the cancer conversation, the one that they don't want to talk about is that sleep deprivation, shift work is a known carcinogen.
Right.
So we're talking about this chemical that we've got in our body that, is a new discovery that's absolutely a piece of the puzzle. But every third day, we're doing the very thing that causes cancer, that causes weight gain, that depletes testosterone, that causes infertility, that causes alcoholism, that doesn't allow you to process trauma. All these things are direct, scientifically proven correlations. And we turn our head to that and we go, oh, there's this chemical in our gear. Yes, there is. But let's look at the even bigger piece of the puzzle. And by the way, the Northeast has been working this shift. DC is one of them as well, for decades. Yep. And you're acting like this is never going to happen. It's a unicorn fighting rainbows. And for example, to put the blame on the IFF, we have people working in departments that work this shift that are not saying to the rest of the membership, we need to get you to where we are. So I think, these are all little pieces of this puzzle.
Well, and again, I agree. Let's get rid of PFAS. But PFAS is the low-hanging fruit. That's absolutely the low-hanging fruit. That was an easy one. The fact that Diane Cotter came up with the research, did what she had to do, and made it a national issue is fantastic, and should be highly applauded by the fire service and all of our families and everybody affected, right? And anybody that's drinking water anywhere where we flowed foam over the years, for Christ's sake, right? But it's the low-hanging fruit. There's so many other things that we need to attack with it. It's got to be multi-pronged. And going after DuPont or Dow or whoever it is, going after gear manufacturers, is it doable? Sure, it's doable, but it's not the answer. It's only part of it. It's a small piece of the answer. So, the other thing is we're the biggest freaking hypocrites in the world, and myself included, right? I was at FDIC and a bunch of guys said, "Hey, let's go to the cigar bar," right? Well, I don't smoke cigars. I get headaches from cigars. Not that I don't like them, because I did when I was younger, but now it gives me a terrible headache and sinus problem. So I don't go. But I could walk by a cigar bar and see 50 firemen sitting there smoking away, right? Now you're going to tell me that doesn't affect your health, right? I like really good tequila, so I will imbibe. Is that good for my health? No, of course it's not, right? And sometimes it's not in moderation over the years. So You know what I mean? We're our worst enemies, and we're hypocrites about a lot of things. Oh, it's the PFAS, it's the PFAS. Yeah, right. It has that's what's doing it to you. Come on, but it's beyond that, and we have to take responsibility for ourselves, and we don't always do that. And as I've been a union member my whole life, but the union is good at grabbing low hanging fruit. And not that they don't fight some really hard fights, because we've been involved in that, but it's time. Here we are, right? Here we are, and the good thing for us and good thing for this next generation of firefighters and the generations that are going to follow us is the research is there. The science and the chemistry is there. There's brilliant people like the folks like Dr. Orman and Dr. Stapleton and Dr. Kessler, who I listened to yesterday. They are doing the work for us on our behalf, and we don't even have to pay them, right? The union doesn't have to pay them. Maybe the union would rather pay them so they could get the results they want. But, our taxpayers are doing that through FEMA, through everybody else. And obviously that's what researchers do. They research to the point where, oh shit, I need more research money to continue my career. But we need them, and they're working on our behalf. So, and I think they do it in the right way. But I think that down the road, the next generation of firemen are going to be much better suited for everything, and they're going to be well protected, at least better protected than you and I were, because of all this, and because people like you are voicing their opinions, and old guys like me are still doing it. And I mean, hell, years ago, Billy Goldfeder was probably the first guy in the fire service to really utilize social media and the internet. When those of us were trying to figure out what AOL was, Billy had already mastered it and was putting out tons of information. Well, now the podcast world they are guys like you, what you've done, guys like Jeremy Donch with National Fire Radio and some of the others. They are that next generation who have pushed it to the next level. And I really believe that this next generation, my son's era and kids coming up through the job right now, they're going to take it to a whole nother level. I sure hope. And I guess that transitions a little bit too, but we all talk about, this generation of kids, man, they're this, they're that. Well, I was that generation years ago, and the old guys told me I was a piece of shit too. So it's cyclical, but I really do believe that it can be better. And let me just go back real quick to the dorm thing and the culture of the firehouse.
Yeah, please.
I met a guy, and honest to God, I go to so many firehouses, I don't always recall where I met people at. But this gentleman was talking to me, and we were talking about firehouses, and they were building a new firehouse. And he said, "You know what the problem with our firehouses are? They're way too big. Because we've lost every bit of family feeling. We're not with each other enough. Our company officers don't demand that we stay, like you said. Hey, you can go in your bunk room when you're taking a nap. I'm totally cool with nap for success. But when you're done with that, don't stay in the bunk room all day. Get out here on the floor." I'm a big proponent, and I know it's not the healthiest thing in the world, but I'm a big proponent of having that squad table at the back of the engine room where the guys just sit and talk fire. Because when we did it in our firehouse, my chief hated it because he didn't like the look of it. It looked like we were just hanging out. But man, more fire stories got told, more training, informal training, more informal critiques. When you're looking at fire stuff, you tend to look and do fire stuff, as opposed to when you're in the TV room watching, whatever you're watching. We're playing, these guys like Call of Duty in the middle of the night. Like, you got to be shitting me, So that's my rant on that. But I really do believe when the guy said firehouses are being built so big, look at the money they could save if we tightened up the firehouse and brought the crews together a little bit more. And he's right. He's not wrong. I never thought of it until he said that.
When I think about, again, I always go back to Anaheim just because it's the most cohesive, tight-knit as a whole department that I work for. We were constantly obviously running calls. I mean, I've never worked in a department that wasn't extremely busy. But if you're not, then you got your workouts, which, certainly in Anaheim, that was a culture everyone worked out in Orange County. And then ultimately the last place I worked, I was, able to develop that within the station, at least, where we'd all do workouts together. Then you've got training together. Then you cooking. I mean, again, Anaheim, we cooked all the time. We ate together as a crew. Now you've got UFC, or I think it was Dexter. We'd watch together. You know what I mean? So now you've created all these things where we are together. Yeah. Then, right, I'm going to go, Skype the wife or whatever it is that you're doing. Of course, then you go into your private space. I think that's phenomenal. And like I said, the the deeper sleep that you're going to get, when you're in an individual dorm and you're not being woken up for everyone else's calls is essential. But those communal spaces, and that's a culture that's again driven by the officers, senior firefighter, whatever that dynamic is. But I agree, they do become so vast. Is there a way of either, as you said, just do we need them as big as that, and or maybe we invest a little bit more in those communal areas, like pickleball is huge now, over the line. We used to play, all these volleyball in the back apron, basketball, which is one that was always shut down because someone rolled an ankle. It's like, but you're missing all the cardiovascular benefits of everyone that's playing. So I think you can really nurture that other stuff and put it back in. And we'll this is a good transition now. We were talking before we hit record, this kids today, they don't want to work. They just want to be YouTubers. And I've said this many times. If you actually look at the things that are being talked about as far as Gen Z, the Wall Street Journal published an article saying that they are going into the trades more than ever. And what's happening is the same reason that they're not choosing the fire service, because you can do a Google search now. Is it healthy to be a firefighter? And it's terrifying, everything that comes up. And then you can do a Google search. Is it worth getting a degree? $60,000 in debt, piece of paper, doesn't guarantee you a job. These young, intelligent people are going, that sounds a bit shit too. Let me go be a welder. So we have this group of people that want to do hands-on tradesman training, but they're looking at our profession, at the things that we've discussed, all the, the poor wages, the recruitment crisis that's forged, all this overtime. Now you've got, cancers and suicides and divorces and all the things. Yes, it's a dark side, doesn't negate what an amazing job we have, but it's just as important to discuss. These young people, they're in touch with their physical health, their mental health, their relationships. And so when we fix it, like Pasco County, the phone is ringing off the hook in the HR department again. But until we do, we're dissuading kids. And then we're saying, the recruitment crisis is because kids don't want to work. I call bullshit. You call bullshit on that. So you obviously got a much better lens on the fire service, on the training side. Talk to me about that kind of, two-dimensional view of our young people today. And what are you actually seeing as far as the passion of these new recruits that you're working with?
So it is different. It's absolutely different. And I don't think it's different in a bad way. I don't teach at as many conferences as some of these guys do, but we do a lot of conferences, and we do a lot of individual departmental training with our company. And what I'm seeing, a lot of young firemen come to these conferences, and they're coming on their own dime, right? And I'm seeing a influx of women in the fire service. Not all younger women either, not just 20-year-olds, but some women who are in their late 20s, early 30s, mid 30s. Even in the volunteers, starting to see that influx, and certainly you're seeing more a diverse group. You're seeing more minorities and so forth. Is that why that is? I couldn't tell you, and I'm not there to study it. But I can tell you that I'm finding these folks want to learn. If they're going to a conference on their own, I don't need to talk to them about why you should love this job and why you should be a fireman and all this other nonsense. You're already freaking there. Somebody already preached to them, and now they're the choir, right? I don't need to preach to the choir. I need to teach them skills, right? I know it's the old FDNY saying is the two things you can't teach somebody is heart and balls. Well, it doesn't matter where the balls are, right? If it's a girl or a guy, I don't care. Whatever the case may be, if you've got the heart and you've got the desire to do it, we can give you the skills if you're willing to learn the skills. And I believe that they are willing to learn the skills. The ones I'm seeing show up, obviously they are the 1%ers, right? They're coming. They want this. Or somebody has told them, you need to do this. Come with me. And their buddy grabbed them by the hand and said, hey, let's share a room. Let's share a ride up to Long Island for the Joey D. Or let's, go down to, wherever in Florida for Orlando Fire Conference or TC Hot or the pools trainings that are all over the country now up in New England. Rusty Ricker does tremendous job with all the training up there. So what I'm seeing is guys who want to do this, and they're building their own identities and they're building their own departmental cultures through training with each other, and they're energetic and they want to do it. They just need the right people to lead them to it, right? They're not dumb by any means. They're probably smarter than we were. They may not have the street smarts that we had, but they're intelligent. They understand processes and things of that nature way more than I ever did as a kid, way more. And they're into it. They're energetic. The biggest negative I see is a lot of false prophets, right? And people who have great influence in the fire service because of their outstanding social media skills, and because they can get on a table and pound their fist and hoot and holler and tell everybody this is how it should be, and they're going to will you to what it's going to be. And in the end, you see a lot of chest beating, you see a lot of egos, you see a lot of narcissism, and you see a lot of bullshit trying to make themselves something they're not, or trying to pull in a ton of money, right? I mean, I don't want to see a guy who's living in $1 million house telling me, I really need you at my conference because, you need this. Bullshit. Your conference is probably overpriced and you're putting your kids through college on me. I get it, I want those salt of the earth instructors who want to work with people, who want to get them better, who are willing to sit down. And you'll see this at conferences. I watch this. I teach it for the Joey D every year, right? My on-scene does, and myself, anything we can do, we try to help sponsor that. For those that don't know it, Lieutenant Joey DiBernardo Memorial Foundation, truly one of the greatest groups of people I've ever been a part of. Chief D does a great job with it in Joey's honor. But I've watched and seen some of the people who I look up to in the fire service, whether it's Mike Dugan retired from FDNY, or it's Mike Champo, or it's Mo Davis, or Clyde Gordon, or those guys from Houston. Another guy that's fabulous, and I watch him teach, and I watch him talk to young guys, whether it's in the bar or somewhere on the drill ground. There's a guy named Larry DiCamillo he's a truck guy. He's a retired Houston guy. Now he's a chief in Texas. And I watch them interact, and it's humble, and it's giving the firefighters what they need. And man, most of these kids, they don't understand the greatness of who they're in the presence of. And not to blow all my buddies' egos up any bigger than they are, but I stand there in awe sometimes and listen to these things myself. And I'm like, shit, am I learning a lot just standing here in the bar, right? And we have so much more options and so many more opportunities to deliver this to this next generation than anybody did to us. Because when you and I were young, we read Fire Engineering or Firehouse magazine, right? We didn't have all the online information. It was just beginning. There were only a few conferences here or there, and really, I didn't even know about them. Chiefs went to that shit. I didn't know the firemen could go to that, Now it's all there. But we've got to vet it down. We've got to, I'm not going to send a guy from New Egypt to the high-rise conference that guys do, because they have nothing over 3 stories other than a silo, right? So, but should I send them to a silo rescue class? Yeah, probably, right? So we have to vet out what we're doing, who we're doing it with, and give them what's pertinent. But they're learners, and we can learn a ton from them. I look at that just like kind of my kids' friends. And some of the kids he hangs out, not kids, they're all young men now. They're all in their mid-20s or so. But like some of the guys in Thibodeau is a good example. We go down there and we're training them in fire stuff. Well, one of the guys, he just got on a job next door to there, and he was studying to be a pilot. And then had something came up, and they told him that physically he wasn't able to do it. So he went to HVAC school, got his HVAC certification instead of going to college, and now he's on the job. Can that guy provide a lot to the fire service, and does he have the ability? Hell yeah. One of the other kids works for the diocese and is kind of their IT specialist, I think, down there. Well, man, what fire department can't use a great IT guy who, by the way, is in great physical shape, is a great person, hardcore fireman, great at training, and I've watched him stretch into buildings and does a hell of a job. These are the people that we want. We want to recruit them, bring them in, bring them into the fold, nurture them. Don't pussyfoot around them, make them work, but nurture them. And they are us 20 years from now. I can't hold it to my vest. I can't take it to my grave with me. What the hell good would that do? So, you know, it frustrates the shit out of me at times watching some of this, but they're not bad. This next generation will be just fine in my eyes.
It's funny you use the example. I remember going to the Orlando Fire Conference a few years ago, and it was exactly that. I think it felt like about 3 years, but I think it was a 60 or 90-minute presentation, but it was chest thumping. You got to be into the job. And I remember looking around going, we're at the Orlando Fire Conference. For the love of God, everyone in here is into the job or is trying to be into the job.
Yeah.
You know, and that was the takeaway: be into the job, period. You know, and this is the problem that you see. You know, and I think this is what's really exciting. I've had a lot of people say to me, the fit recruits that we are getting now are in really great shape, because when you came on, which is way before I did, I only ever had 14 years, you know, there wasn't CrossFit and mud runs and, you know, mobility and foam rolling and meditation and breath work and none of that. And then when I came in, still only, you know, 22 years ago, still wasn't that conversation ready. It was still the tail end of the bodybuilding. I discovered CrossFit at Anaheim, one of my truck partners, and that, you know, revolutionized everything. Well, now this young group has been brought up with all of that stuff, you know, everything from Wim Hof and meditation through to really well-designed strength conditioning programs and the ability to test themselves in endurance events. And they're coming in now with that skill set. So those people exist. I watched my son's cross-country team, his track team, JROTC, some phenomenal young men and women that are going through the Marion County, you know, public school system here that would be, and hopefully some of them are, phenomenal firefighters. So they exist. And yes, do we need to make that portion larger by addressing the national obesity epidemic and the mental health crisis and all these other things? Of course, that's another piece of the puzzle. But the other part, extreme ownership, everyone seems to love Jocko's book, is what are we doing to attract that group of people that is going into nursing, welding, whatever other professions, because they're looking at us and going, I've always wanted to be a firefighter, but I didn't realize that they didn't take care of their people. Because that's it. That's the bottom line. If you're working 56 hours a week and doing nothing about the recruitment crisis and retention, and now you're forcing men and women to work 80 hours and call their loved ones at 7:30 in the morning and say, I know I told you I was going to go to the Donuts for Dads, but I can't come home now.
That sucks.
Then you have fucking failed us. So if we want to attract the right kind of people and put that bar where it needs to be, which is high, because jobs, you know, lives depend on our ability to do our job, then we have to address the things that are broken. So I think 100% these people exist. And I think that the next group of firefighters are going to be even better than us. That's the whole point of a parent or a coach, is to groom the next generation to learn from your mistakes and be even better and look back at us and go, what the fuck were they thinking 10, 20 years ago? Yeah. But the only way we're going to do that is to have the humility to say, some of the things that we're doing are broken. Who is doing it right? Can you tell me how you did it? The rising tide lifts all ships.
I totally agree. You know, we don't want to be dinosaurs leaving dinosaur eggs, right? And unfortunately, that's happened over the generations, and it always will. Those folks will always be there, but we need to negate those people. We need to be the positive influence that pushes them to the side. And I agree with you. What I've seen with today's generation, and maybe even right before this, they don't necessarily feel that you're dedicated. If you're not going to be dedicated to them, they are not going to show any dedication to you, which I don't blame them. But when we were raised, it was different. I knew when I came on the job, I'm spending my whole career here. Unless I go to a bigger city and I can really upgrade things, this is where I'm going to be, right? And a few years into it, I knew this was the rest of my career. This group, this group that are in their 20s now that we're attracting and trying to bring in, that loyalty doesn't necessarily exist, right? And I see it with my son. I see it with my stepson. My stepson has been through, I think he's on like his third job in about 4 years. He's improved his lot in life drastically by doing that. And he had the balls to do it. When I was his age, I wouldn't have had the balls to do it. And I say that all the time. Like, I'm really proud of him because he had the balls to step out of his comfort zone and go to the next level and get for his family and what he's trying to build. And had they treated him like gold, would he have stayed and thought twice about it? I think so, right? Where my son plays into it, he started in one department. Um, they preach a culture. They do things their way. He definitely did not fit in there. It wasn't his thing. Things went really south really fast, and he luckily went to another department quickly because honestly, I don't know that his mental health was going to hold up much more because he was in a bad spot, and that place really helped build him back up. And I look at that chief and I thank him, but he knew that the kid didn't want to be there. It was a smaller, more rural county style department, and he wanted a big city. And eventually he moved to a bigger city down in Louisiana. But he told me, I've got one move left in me. I want one more place, and this is where I want to be, and this is what I'm working for. And he did it. I give him all the credit in the world, and he's working for a very good fire department in Louisiana right now, in my opinion. And he told me, Dad, it's the last step. This is where I'm going to be. Couldn't be happier, right? They are treating their employees well, from what I can see. Their members are treated not necessarily like employees, but like firemen, and with some integrity. And I'm sure they have their problems, but they seem to be treating people the right way. They promote training. They promote, the brotherhood and sisterhood, and they're doing it right. He doesn't want to leave there. That's where he wants to. He bought a house down there. He's setting up roots, man. That's it, right? They have so many opportunities in the world today that why would they stay with a shitty organization? And now, like you said, once the ball starts rolling in Florida, now Florida's tough because folks like from up here have to start completely fresh going to Florida, right? So none of my certs transfer. I would have had to start all over again. And even if I was in my 20s, I may not want to do that again. But a place in South Carolina, North Carolina, a place in Ohio, that they say, yep, we're going to go to 2472s. We're going to provide this level of financial, assistance. We're going to, provide maybe college education for you or something like that. Well, you're not going to have a recruiting lapse at all because everybody's going to start pulling out of these other shittier departments and say, yeah, I'm going to go where I'm wanted. Just like what are they, the hospitals that do that to get nurses, right? Same thing. If you offer them the right things and you treat them well, you create that good culture, why wouldn't they come to you? And you're right. The people who are sitting on the back of the wagon right now thinking, it's going to be okay. We don't have to change. We're the fire department. People are coming to us because they want to be firemen. That was 1988, man. That ain't today. That's not today. And if you're not thinking like the person who is on the reins of the horse pulling the wagon, who is really setting that course, you're beat. You're beat. They're all going to that front of the wagon. They ain't going to stay in the back with you. If that makes
100%.
sense.
No, it does. Actually, there was I want to give a shout out. I wish I could remember the name of the department now, but I was talking to a firefighter from North Carolina, and they were transitioning from, I think it was volunteer and paid on call, if I've got that right, or volunteer and part-time to full-time. And I think they still have, volunteer element. And he said to me, we're thinking of, maybe changing to a different work week and maybe Kelly's first. And I was like, look, if you want to do it properly the first time, do a 24/72. And everyone that's come to me with all these different schedules, that still ends up being the gold standard, because for every 24 hours, which is pushing it for a human being, you need at least 72 hours to recover from that. So if you start messing around with, different versions of that, it's not as good. And certainly if you do 24/48 with Kelly's, you're way behind now. And he took it and he ran with it. And the other day I got a message saying, that's it, we're going 24/72. And I've got so much admiration for saying, we're going to do it right the first time. I've got another friend of mine, same exact position, didn't do that, 48/96. And I facepalmed. But it is what it is. But yeah, I mean, that kind of, understanding the value. And then the big thing for me is the bar. If you want to have this conversation about 24/72, it's incredible, because then you get to have the conversation about fitness, standards, annual fitness assessments. Because if we're talking about health, Go ask an ocean lifeguard if it's unfair that they have to do a swim test every 6 months or a year. They'll laugh in your face. I was a
Right.
lifeguard myself. So for cops and firemen and paramedics and EMTs to start crying in their cornflakes about being held to a standard when they were held to a standard in the academy, certainly fire and police, maybe not EMS, but it should be, is insane. So now we get to move the needle on the work week. Now we put fitness standards in. Now these young fired up recruits are like, well, wait a second. This is getting pretty hard to be a firefighter now. I think I'm interested. Because I can tell you, hand on my heart, the worst fire department I ever worked for, the bar was in a trench in the floor, and no one wanted to work for them. Yeah. The best fire department I ever worked for, they would cut a quarter of every probationary class. No one ever left that fire department. And you had people lining up around the building to work for them. So you want to forge recruitment. You fix the things that are broken that show your employees that you care. And then you put that bar freaking high and you challenge the best recruits that are out there to reach that bar. You will see recruitment go through the roof again.
I can't agree with you more. And I will say this, I take this back in the career setting, at least in the Northeast, I throw this in the union's lap. Because my own union for years fought fitness standards, fought it tooth and nail. And I know we talked about this years ago when I was on with you. And I'm sure today they would fight it again to a degree because they don't, we're here to protect our men. Well, if you're here to protect our men and women of this job, I don't want the guy next to me that can't do the job. I'm not in the condition I'm in today. I should not be nearly, I don't feel that I can do the job I once did. Right at 55, I probably should lose 40 pounds. I'm still riding on a volunteer fire engine. I'm still doing my job. But do I do it as well as that 25-year-old? Not physically. Mentally, yeah, absolutely. I can outthink him. I can tell him what he needs to do. But physically, I'm not going to be as fast, as strong, and as mobile as that guy. But I should have a standard level to meet. And if I don't, I'm going to continue to slip. In a lot of places, no matter how self-driven we are and self-motivated, over time we start to slip. And we all have that gap at times in our lives, right? So I feel that. I watched my fire department hire a guy off the civil service list. Now I'm retired, right? They hired this guy recently and within the last few years. He was a wonderful kid, great kid. When he took the test 3 years ago, he was in much better physical condition than he's in today. Well, civil service rules, our union, the whole 9 yards. Nobody bitched that today he doesn't meet anywhere near a standard. He's a liability to himself, to his family, and to the job. Bottom line, I don't care how great a person you are and how much I love you. It's not right. And is that the guy that you want coming through your bedroom window, or that you would expect to be able to come through your bedroom window, for Christ's sake? If we're not going to hold them to a standard, this should be in the volunteer service too. And I know what they say in the volunteers. It's like, hey, we'll take anybody we can get. Okay, take them, but you can't rely on them to be a frontline fireman. Bottom line, in the career service, you hold the freaking hammer, right? You're paying them. They got to meet a standard. Is the union willing to step up and say, listen, man, I can't protect your job if you can't run the mile in 12 minutes or 14 minutes or whatever the thing is, or if you can't finish a CPAT in whatever the time is for a CPAT. There's no excuse. I talked to a woman who's on the job recently in the Northeast, and I don't really know her from Adam other than I've seen her social media and I see that she's into the job. And then I talked to a couple people just because I want to, find out. When somebody's asking me my advice, I want to find out about them before I'm going to give advice. And everybody I talked to said, very strong firefighter, does what it takes, physically fit, really into the job, whole 9 yards, right? And I talked to her about it, and just a beast to prove. Very much, I put her in contact with Jenny, and it was right after Jenny Grima's. This was a week or so ago. I sent her the Jenny Grima link to her interview with you, and said, "This is somebody I think you two should talk." And her motivation and her dedication to what she's doing, and she's not a young kid, she's got kids, the whole 9 yards. Those are the people. If she can do it, I can do it. If she can do it, that 24-year-old kid who just maybe graduated college or who works, wherever he works and has decided he's going to get on a job, get your ass in shape and do it. And the union should hold your feet to the fire for the next 30 years of your career, just like the town should. Our state police have a run every year. Why can't we? I mean, you see it. I don't understand it. My wife and I have this conversation all the time. She's a retired Division I All-American athlete, and at her age is still out there running on field hockey fields, coaching kids, and really outworks a lot of the damn kids. So it's like, if we can do this, you can do this. It's, again, like I said about wanting to do, you got to have the goddamn will to make it happen. And without the will and the initiative, what are we doing? We're failing ourselves. We're failing our community. Down the road, that guy who's so far out of shape, or that girl who can't throw the ladder because she didn't drill like Jenny explained the drilling, is not going to be able to get that ladder to that window where that kid is. And now what did we do? It's on us. It's not even just on them. It's on us as well. It's a screwed up system, man.
I think the thing that pisses me off, and it's the same with the 24/72, there is no downside, from saving money to restoring relationships to recovery, from training, processing, learning. I mean, everything gets better, everything. And it's the same with fitness standards. Our ability to perform, and I've said this many times, the last place I worked that hardly ever saw fire, next to my station was a 30-story hotel, 30. So with the high-rise strip, at the time I was 168 pounds, the high-rise strip was another 100 pounds, 30 floors up, worst case scenario, before you go to work. There's a reason why we have a fitness standard. Pavarotti was a phenomenal singer, doesn't mean he would have been a good firefighter. So just because someone is good at something doesn't mean they're the right thing for the job. I would be a horrible accountant. I always say that. So performance is obviously the most important thing, arguably, in one area, but the other thing is longevity. Every department that has opposed fitness standards has said, I don't mind our people dying younger. That's literally what you're saying. I don't want to maintain their health. So therefore, if they die of everything from, everything, strokes, heart disease, cancers, whatever it is that we all know are amplified through obesity as well as sleep deprivation, then you're saying, well, that's okay. It's okay that we live 5-6 years after retirement. That's perfectly acceptable with me, rather than having the guts to say that is unacceptable. Not only our ability to perform, but I care about our people. Oh, and by the way, they're paying union dues, so I should probably actually earn my money. But their lifespan is important. I want them to crush it in retirement. I want them to be drawing their pension for decades after this. So again, there is no downside, but I'm always very fair. Up until recently, the environment has worked against fitness, health, full stop. The work week is destroying you, and they don't have the capacity to do these high intensity workouts and then recover. They don't have the motivation because they're so exhausted. They don't even have the time sometimes. They're being forced in all these mandatory overtime. So this is why I think this 24/72 revolution is the perfect opportunity to say, we are going to create an environment that allows you to thrive and perform and be home when you're supposed to. But as and parallel to that, we're finally going to go put those fitness standards in. And the misconception is, oh, you're trying to take everyone's jobs. No, of course, there will be an on-ramp period, a year, 18 months, whatever it is, to get to this point.
Yep.
But by that point, you're going to be one of two people. The person who put the work in because they value their job, they value their health, and they got back to where they've always wanted to be. And the person who doesn't want to do the work. And if someone is scared of being tired, is scared of a workout, I do not want that person on the hose line or on the roof next to me, period. So it even allows you to filter out the people that slip through the cracks, or they've just kind of fallen out of love with the job. And then if you're lucky, then you transition into prevention or take an early retirement. But those people have no business being in a profession where lives are at stake. So you go to a fitness standard, you give everyone the tools to get back to that point where they do meet those requirements. And then maybe you might lose one and two that just realize they don't want to do that anymore. But again, there is no downside other than, as I've said many times, having the courage to say, this needs to happen.
It's absolutely what it is. It's the will, it's the courage, it's the drive to make it better. I've listened to so many people who've come on your podcast and some of the others, and folks who aren't in our profession, a lot of the military operators, and a lot of the people who are studying the military operators and so forth. And I don't compare us to them anyway. Well, I've heard guys say, "Oh, firemen, we're the Navy SEALs of the fire service," in SOC. Get the fuck out! No, you're not. Right? It's just. I was in the ocean swimming the other day, and it was really rough, right? And I came out and I said to my wife, "I don't know how those guys in the service truly do this. Like, I'm a strong swimmer. We were out there swimming for 15, 20 minutes. I'm like, man, this is cooked. But I listen to these folks and I look at the mental health aspect of it, right? If they're healthier, their mental health is better. Their relationships are better. I wish I had known this when I was screwing up my life years ago. I'm blessed. I got a second chance. I'm in a good spot. My life is good. But, so many of the guys didn't get the second chance and literally ate a bullet or did what they did because of all these things that compounded. And the physical fitness is always part of that at least it's a key component. If we've got good physical fitness, it helps towards our mental fitness. We do our job better. It just all falls into place. And I'm not the guy who should preach physical fitness. If I take my shirt off and look in the mirror, I'm not pleased, right? But I know what it takes. And I just have a strong belief in it. And it goes to, again, chief officers, right? I watch all these different memes and videos and reels of guys who are just tearing the shit out of the administration of fire departments, right? Some of them are well earned. I'm not gonna lie. Some of these guys deserve every bit of it. But Jesus Christ, if you're a chief officer or a commanding officer of an organization, commissioners, whatever they are, have the balls to step up and say, we're going to implement this. And I'll equate it to this: whether you like Trump, you hate Trump, whatever the case may be. And it's a completely polarizing person, right? So I'm not here to talk politics. But what do we see him do? He does it, whether he ruffles feathers or not, he does it. And then he'll say, well, let the courts decide, right? Well, at least he took action. And I don't agree with every action he takes, but at least he took some action and said, all right, I'm making a decision. I think it's making things better. And if you don't like it, fight me and we'll see where we end up. But maybe we can work this out together. And that's what chiefs need to do with their unions and with everybody else. You can't look at it as your complete foe. Yeah, you're on opposite sides of the aisle, right? But make a decision. If I was a fire chief today in a fire department, that needed this, I would immediately say we're going to institute a health and safety program. We're going to institute annual fit tests, right? Not just your fit test on your mask, but fitness testing. And if you don't meet a certain standard, you're going to have this time, like you said, to on-ramp. And if you refuse to do that, or you physically can't do that, or medically, it'll be a case-by-case basis. But we're going to make change in this organization, and we're going to see it happen, and we're going to be better at what we do because of it. And you don't have to look like an Adonis to do it. I've worked with guys who were 300 pounds and 6'4", and they could throw line all day, ladders all day, and do fine in their fit tests, right? They were great, absolute studs. So it's not the skinny little guy who weighs 140 and, is running marathons. It can be for all of us, but it's got to be done. And if officers don't have the balls to step up and do it, or the will to step up and do it, you're failing. You're failing the fire service.
100%. And I agree. I couldn't agree more. You don't have to have, a six-pack beach body. It's not about that at all. And I think that even with the strength and conditioning coaches, they're talking about, Mets on the bike or all this stuff. I'm like, to me, this is just my opinion now. Forget even that. Go back to the CPAT or the fire sled, the FPAT, I think they call it, yep. Whatever it is, fireground tasks. So whether you are male, female, 18, 50, gay, straight, trans, half dinosaur, whatever you are, you either can or you can't. It's just that simple, because if we're on the fireground all bunkered up, all you can see is those who can and those who can't. We all know who they are.
Yep.
So no one can say it's unfair, because it's the very implements that you had to use in fire school. And I think that's a great overall fitness test that then will transition to your ability to respond to an MCI shooting or an extrication. It's if you've got the aerobic capacity and the muscular endurance to get a solid time on a CPAT, then it's a good overall, barometer for other things too. So it's not even unfair at all. I've said this many times. When I was 46, I did the CPAT in 7 minutes, 20 seconds. I am not by any way, shape, or form the fastest, strongest in anything ever. I just made sure that I own my own shit. So if a 46-year-old can shave 3 minutes off a CPAT, don't tell me that it's air quotes too hard to do in 10 minutes and 20 seconds.
Right.
So I think, it's just about, saying line in the sand, enough is enough. We've done it the wrong way for too long. We fixed some of the things that were broken, i.e. the work week, which now created this immense interest in recruitment. Now all our spots are filled with each person with, a career person now. Mandatory overtime has gone. Now we're going to ask you to hold this standard, which again is just going to amplify the health benefits that we've already worked in with this work week. And now, as you said, the mental health side, the camaraderie side, the time with our family, all these things are going to improve. And maintaining your health means that when you are 55, you spent 20 years in the fire service, you're still able to then go out in your backyard and throw a football around or, go ice skating with your kids.
It's so important, and now I see it as quote unquote a retiree, which I've completely screwed up retirement apparently because I'm working harder now than I ever did. But but it's my choice, right? With the training company, it's my choice. But as a retiree, I see it even more, right? Because I see a lot of guys my age who are in terrible shape, who are getting these diseases, who just they're not living any real quality of life, and it's scary because there was a time where we didn't pay attention to those things, and I pray that the PFAS isn't already there and gotten me pretty good, or I don't have I take all my tests, I go to my physicals, make sure that my cardiac stuff is correct, my pulmonary stuff is still good. It's very important to me. In Jersey, we have a thing called a gift from Captain Buccio that we did. It's free. Every fireman in the state can do it for free, and I do it every year. So as you get older, you start to get a better perspective on this too. I think because you're like, shit, man, I don't want to. I'm on the lower numbers here. I'm not going to last as long as I thought I would. So I got to be more cautious of it. And I want this younger generation to be better than me. That's our whole goal, right? You always want your kids to do better than you all. My whole thing is I want the generation of the fire service to be better than me. I watch my wife coach field hockey. And again, like I said, she coaches at a high level, and her whole thing is making sure these girls have the fitness level to be able to maintain, and then it's the skills. But they've got to be fit to do their job, so to speak. And it's no different, right? It's just no different. That's how high performing folks do it. And it's doable, right? It's doable. I see it. So I guess that's where I'm at with it.
Absolutely. Well, I want to kind of pivot a little bit. You have quite the cadre that you work with on-scene training specifically, and then obviously you're all these other conferences as well. One common denominator I've seen from these extremely motivated, hungry firefighters is more often than not, the profit is not received in their own land. And there's a very toxic culture towards them. And so many people I know that are just, really beautiful, passionate firefighters really struggle with that kind of organizational betrayal almost within their own department. So talk to me about that perspective if you have one.
Yeah, I lived it, man. I lived it. There's guys in Hamilton right now that hate my guts, I'm sure of it, and say, oh, he didn't do shit on the job. Okay. You're not a prophet in your own land. The old story, 50 miles in a briefcase makes you an expert. That tends to happen. And unfortunately, a lot of these guys who portray themselves as experts aren't. And they're not honest. And they're snake oil salesmen. And they're selling themselves, which is even worse. It's difficult at times. I can tell you that when I was in charge of training at work, I brought in a lot of other people from outside the organization. Because again, over time, listening to me, they got tone deaf. They didn't want to hear me. It's just Heller talking again. What the hell does he know? So I would bring in very good people who I felt were the real deal. They were vetted. They knew what they were doing, and they were a plus to our department. So I lived it. Even in my volunteer department today, um, I'm sure that there's feathers ruffled and personalities get in the way, and at times we don't embrace some of the good in some people, right? Um, so I see that the people that are part of On Scene are some of the most humble, well educated, well experienced, and just quality people you could ever meet. And I don't know the formula for it. I had a little formula when I started On Scene of I wanted geographical diversity and departmental diversity when I was doing this because I can't have just a bunch of FDNY guys preaching FDNY. You can't have a bunch of guys from Florida just preaching how they do it, Osceola, Florida, Orlando, Florida, or wherever. And honestly, it really all did come through the Fools. I met these guys over the years. We were all part of the Fools in all different parts of the country, and little by little, a friend told a friend about somebody else, and that's how this whole thing grew. Um, my friendship with Bart Simpson, one of the founding Fools, right, one of my dearest friends in the world. He never rose above firefighter in Osceola. Didn't want to, but man, a senior man who was completely respected. He's retired from there now, and he's deputy chief in Malabar, but highly respected, highly educated, highly trained, very well experienced. But I'm sure there were guys in his own department that were like, it's him. Oh, it's just him again. And then I look around at others. I've got a good friend of mine, and we became friends only a few years ago. My brother-in-law is a retired Prince George's County, Maryland lieutenant. And he said, you ever think of bringing Ariel Jackson into your fold? He's a hell of a guy. I knew who he was. I know he had taught with some Jersey friends of mine, and he was very good and respected, but I didn't really know him. So I sat down and talked with him. And Ariel's a captain in Anne Arundel, Maryland. This is a guy he's generational, second generation at least. His dad retired from Baltimore City as a captain, worked there during the war years, the whole 9 yards. Ariel has worked in the busiest places, highly respected, still going to a lot of fires, although now he's running their training academy, probably much to his chagrin. But and I look at him, and I've never heard somebody ever say a bad thing about the man because he's just so genuine and such a good, I wouldn't even say teacher, but sharer, as if that's a way of putting it. He shares his knowledge so friggin' well and relates to every student so friggin' well that, I'm just blessed to be around folks like that. Look at what Jenny went through. And she didn't go into detail. And she was I would say truly a lady about her conversation with you. But there were people who abused her, who they were mentally torturing the shit out of that one. And there's somebody who just wanted to be good at her job, who was a brilliant person, as you heard. I mean, when she was talking about the cancer stuff and her studies and research and so forth, I was like glued to it, to just hear it all. And I spent a lot of time with her, and I didn't even know some of the depth. But she was shunned by members of her own organization. And I think there's two things when you get involved in these things. Those who are jealous of you are going to create problems. Those who are fearful that you're going to make them actually rise to a level that they don't want to rise to will shun you and create problems. And those who know they're not very bright, and it's nothing against them, but they fear people who they think might be. And they don't want, they almost feel like you're trying to pull the wool over their eyes. And so they're very hesitant of you, if that makes sense. And my dad explained that to me years ago. He was a brilliant man, actually turned down invitation to Mensa on multiple occasions. Told him, I don't want to be with you stuffed shirt assholes, basically. And but he warned me of that. And he said, you're dealing with some folks who are old school, and I was young and aggressive officer, and I was cocky, and I had a big mouth. Now I'm just old with a big mouth. And he warned me of that. And over the years, I've kept that in the back of my head, and I see that. But that's, why do you not like the guy who's the first one up to wash the rig and clean the bathrooms and, be like Jenny and go out and throw ladders? You don't want to have to do it, and they're showing you up. You're not willing to rise to that level. Or, as they say, it's easier to talk about somebody than actually aspire to be somebody. I think that plays a big role in the fire service. We're so full of machismo and bravado, and look at me, and I'm not saying I wasn't there when I was a young fireman. I'm sure I was the same way, but it's not the right way to be. It doesn't foster good things down the road, certainly.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I experienced that, especially in the last place. Especially he's going to make us have to do more things. And of course, I mean, that's the whole point, is we're supposed to be, prepared to do our job, not freak out wearing the mask, be fit enough to climb that high rise with all that gear. I don't think that, asking for that was too far out of left field, but I saw it. I saw, the hate, and it is what it is. Luckily, I've got skin like Teflon. If we're going back to PFAS for a second, I just don't give a fuck what people think. I'll be completely honest, because if it needs to be changed and it's going to save lives, then, I'm going to make sure that I'm part of that conversation. Where I have an issue with all this, though, is I see this as one of the least spoken elements of the mental health crisis. That you have this person that was rah, rah, rah in the academy, and all the instructors are like, this is what you got to be. And they get into these departments and they're like, sit down, shut up. You're making us look bad.
Yeah.
And that can be devastating, because you have joined a tribe and you believe that, this tribe is going to want to be the best, and they're going to take the fitness seriously and the training seriously. And, the culture is going to be one of fun and, playfulness and sports together and eating together. And they get there and everyone's in their individual dorms and they're all eating on their own, and, they barely ever train or whatever the thing is. And now you try and be that spark plug in that firehouse of that department, and you're vilified for it. So I think this is another part, all the people that you surround yourself with, that do kind of put themselves as the tall poppy, not for narcissism, but to actually just try and forge progress, that then get so much negativity that becomes detrimental to their own mental health. So I think this is another important conversation.
I think you're right. It is. It really is. Another example, I talked to someone who is, and again, I don't want to get too detailed because I don't know that they would want me to, but this person is a captain in a department in the Mid-South, a fairly good-sized department, and has gone through, I think, some of the same. Like, guys will be like, "Wow, do I really want to work on that crew? Because I know that captain, they drill every day, and she's into it. She pushes the company hard, but yet she fosters family atmosphere in the company. But do I want to be, a part of being pushed that hard?" And I think that she's received shit in her career because of the same thing. Like, hey, we're going to be better than, this company on B platoon. We are A platoon and we're this, like taking pride in that and fostering that. And has she taken a beating over that? Even beat herself up over it over the years? Probably. And it's sad, because these are the people we need. These are the people that are going to foster the next generation. And like you said, these are the folks who they're creating it. They're creating what's good in the fire service, or pushing it even better. Good example. We just trained with the East Orange, New Jersey Fire Department. 192 members, something of that nature. They work 24/72, typical Northeast Fire Department. They border kind of right around the city of Newark. It's a very rough, poor city. Probably my guess is high 90% African American fire department, which represents the demographics of their city. And I got to tell you, when I was going to go up there to teach, there were folks. Now, I was involved in a company that I do a lot of consulting for, sold them their turnout gear. And so I was up there when they were getting sized and making sure everything went right with them, for them. And then we provided them with their personal escape system training. And what I saw out of 90 people that went through that training was a huge majority of folks who wanted to be there and who wanted to learn, and some company officers who really, really took the lead. And, my company's going to do this. We're going to be the best at this. And they pushed. And then I heard some rumblings. Oh, these freaking guys over there. Oh, he thinks his shit don't stink. And it was the guy who didn't want to do it. Right.
Mm-hmm. Always.
But those guys policed themselves, I thought, very well. And the ones who didn't want to be a part of things, they were treated a little less than they were actually being pushed aside a little bit than the guys who wanted to push themselves hard. And it was a great experience. Myself and Ariel Jackson was up there, and Artie Bloomer, who's a retired captain from Kearney, and another old timer. And we all agreed, man, this was a great group to work with. They were self-motivated, and their company officers were pushing their members. And it was a lot of fun to see that and encouraging them, as opposed to don't let the guy who grumbles in the chair create your problems, because don't let that be the vocal minority and screw you up. Let the good folks be the vocal majority and push it forward. It makes life easier. It makes going to work more fun. It's not going to work. It's kind of the frat house without the booze, honestly. So at least nowadays it's without the booze. Back 30 years ago it was still there. But I really believe in it, and I believe in fostering that in your people. And all the on-scene instructors, it's a trait that they all have, and at some point in their careers, they have all gone through being the pariah, so to speak. And I think we all embrace it in a way, like you said. I embrace it at this point, and if you don't like it, tough shit. This is who I am. This is what I'm going to do. I'm going to go out there and throw portable ladders by myself. Whether I'm good at it, I'm going to get good at it. I went to a fire the other day with the volunteers, and again, I'm 55, right? I was a chief of that volunteer department many years ago. I was on a third due engine, and myself, another 55-year-old guy who's one of my close friends, and two young kids are on the rig. And when we walked up to the staging area kind of, and I looked at the assistant chief and I said, there's only one portable ladder and it's only going to a porch roof. Yeah. Get ladders thrown. So, 100 some degree day. And at 55, I could still go and grab a 24 or 28, whatever it was, and throw it, and set it for the guys that were working up there. It's setting that example and taking that initiative. But had I not, I'm lucky. I get to drill all the time with the on-scene guys at all the training. But if I was still responding and not in a training company and just in my volunteer fire company, it would behoove me to get down there on a Tuesday or a Thursday night, take a ladder off the rig and throw it 10 times until I was, just to refresh myself. That's what leaders do. And if somebody poo-poos that, screw them. You don't need them. That's how you. And for the young folks who are taking that beating, tell them, kiss my ass. I'm here, and we're going to do this. If you don't like it, tough shit.
Absolutely. I want to hit one more area that you actually kind of alluded to a little while ago, and then we'll go to some closing questions. Yeah. Another really exciting conversation with this move to 24/72 for the rest of the country, and this has been something I heard Gainesville talking about a while ago now, is laterals, and therefore the conversation of reciprocity. And again, initially, the first, early adopters of this movement are going to actually be able to get some phenomenal firefighters. Pasco, their last class, they had a bunch of people with 10, 15 years on. I think more than half of their class were also paramedics, which is unheard of in hiring at the moment. So you're going to have that. Then you're going to have the middle group that's going to be obviously, still getting some great people. And then the late adopters are going to be, waiting for other people to go through Fire Academy so they can get it. Yeah. Let's be real. But where I think there's a great opportunity is reciprocity. If I am a paramedic still to this day, if I want to go work in Louisiana or California or New York, I have the National Registry. I challenge the state test. I'm now a medic in that state.
Yes.
There is not that much difference between a New York firefighter, a Florida firefighter, a California firefighter, a Washington State firefighter. There are, of course, idiosyncrasies, but a hose is a hose, a ladder is a ladder, extrication tools, rope rescue. So what blows me away is that we've created these hurdles for people to move laterally around the country, because you have, a Louisiana firefighter and his wife just got into the University of Florida and he wants to now lateral over to Gainesville.
Yep.
Why not? He's got 10 years on, amazing experience doing it a different way. You come over here, of course, there would be a Gainesville orientation to show you the idiosyncrasies of how we do it.
Yep.
There would be a probation,
Yep.
because he might be an absolute turd that his department couldn't wait to get rid of.
Yep.
And then, assuming you pass all those, then you gain all this experience, and from a different department, with different ways of doing it, different ways of thinking. So what is your perception of national reciprocity, of course, with some sort of, orientation academy put in for each department?
I'm 100% in favor of that. Why it's not being done is absolute bullshit in my mind. My buddy Steve Gillespie, retired lieutenant from the FDNY, majority of his career spent in special operations at Squad 41, right? Retires, goes down to North Charleston and becomes their training director for North Charleston Fire Department. Has to go through everything again, challenge every test, and take every goddamn test before he could be a fireman, let alone an officer in South Carolina. What a load of bullshit that is, right? This is a guy who has seen it, done it in the busiest companies in the world, literally. And now you're telling him, well, that's not how we do it down here, son. Well, clearly you need people to come. And in a world like today, when I was younger, you didn't travel around the world. You didn't travel around the country. We weren't nearly the vagrant, the vagrants we are today, right? So we migrate all over the country now, right? My stepson lives in Newport Beach, California. My son lives in Thibodaux, Louisiana. My daughter lives here in New Jersey. We're all over the country. It's not the good old boy system, and it's got to be broken. And the reciprocity is what's holding back a lot of places from getting some absolute stud firemen, right? A lot of great firemen. Now, I know a lot of people during COVID, they were looking, they're like, we're getting out of the Northeast. Screw this, right? Florida started hiring the cops. What they immediately did, they took cops and they gave them reciprocity with just what you're talking about. Why we're not doing that in the fire service is absolute nonsense. Because, again, I know volunteer firemen, maybe here right in the town I'm sitting in Ocean County, New Jersey, who have got their Pro Board Fire 1, Pro Board Fire 2, National Registry EMT, CEVO, all their ICS courses that are all national courses, right? They're fully certed out. But you can't come to Florida or you can't go to California because unless you take all our stuff all over again. It's fucking nonsense. It's absolute nonsense, right? I agree. Do your own academy, certainly do an entry level. Listen, you've got all your certs. We love it, but we need to teach you how we do it in, Jacksonville, Florida, or how we do it in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, or wherever it may be, Dayton, Ohio. So, yeah, but why would you make them start from scratch? Go through that whole investment all over again. It makes no sense. And all you're doing is slowing down your own process. It's just, and Florida, from what I understand, is probably the hardest out of everybody, followed by California, which I don't know if it's state training directors, state fire marshals that are not seeing the light, or we always did it this way, so we're going to continue to do it this way. Well, if I always did things stupidly, why would I want to change that? And yeah, you're absolutely right. It fires me up to no end. It really does. My son was very fortunate. He had gone through Fire 1 in Jersey, left Jersey, got on the job in South Carolina, went through Fire 1, Fire 2, got all his stuff there, pro boarded out, left South Carolina, went to Louisiana, and they accepted it all because it was pro boards and it met their standard. And the only thing he had to do was, I think, his National Registry EMT was a little different. He had to test on something, but that was it. And he was on the job, and that's what they did. They put him through their recruit academy, but it was a shortened recruit academy. And then laterally, when he went from where he was in Louisiana to Baton Rouge, they accepted all of his certs, and then they put him through their probationary period and so forth. And I think that's what he's in. But we're missing out. we're really missing out. I mean, even my volunteer company in New Egypt, I know a couple of the young kids there that just finished Fire 1 and 2. And they're like, they're interested in leaving and going somewhere different and around the country. And one of them was asking me about that. Go, man, go, do it. Don't let geography hold you back. And our reciprocity and certification processes should not be a hurdle to getting good people into our organizations. It's just foolishness.
Yeah, I agree completely. And I've said this a few times now. Like, I am a product of exactly that. I was a Florida certified firefighter, and Anaheim, California said, we'll accept your certs. Yeah. Now, I don't know if that's statewide. I think Anaheim was just like, well, I don't care. We're going to take that. And you see a lot of laterals in California, especially. Mm-hmm. And that actually wasn't even a lateral hiring. I went in as a new hire. Right. And I think every other one of my classmates was not only California, but they were local California. But yeah, they took mine. And then the next, they had the hiring freeze after the crash. And then the next hiring, they said, must have academy from California. So I was then disqualified because I'd moved away from coming back, even though I'd worn their uniform for 3.5 years. So it shows that a department can do a really good thing or a fucking ridiculous thing.
That's ridiculous.
So if Anaheim can say, no, we'll take you, then, do departments have the ability to say, I don't care what the state says, we'll accept your certs. And again, in the process, that hopefully then would open the floodgates for the states to just say, all right, we'll just accept it now, because it doesn't make any sense whatsoever. Of course, you need to have standardization, which is Pro Board, which is National Registry. Right. But after that, welcoming, we'll train you our way. We'll put you on a probation because we don't know you very well. Yeah. And then you come out the other end. Because, I was Florida trained. So we're talking, even in Hialeah, which is a phenomenal academy, when I got, the orientation with them. That was like freaking buds on steroids for firefighters when I was there. But we were still throwing ladders the academy way, lay them flat, walk them up to the wall, pull them out, rotate them. I get to Anaheim and they're like, all right, everyone's shouldering the ladder, sticking it, do all these, roof, ops and talking about bowstring structures and panelized roofs. And I was like, oh shit, I've got a lot to learn because we didn't learn any of this, but that's okay. Right. They set the bar super high. I had to work my ass off, but I made the transition and I ended up being an Anaheim firefighter, which I'm very proud of. But that was the very thing that we're talking about, reciprocity between two states.
It's absolute foolishness that we're not all on that same page. That's just, again, like you said, there's nuances, obviously. I'm going to do something a little different in Hamilton than somebody's going to do in some other city. So we want to make sure that they're trained to our standard as far as how we do it, how we operate, our SOPs, whether we're laying in or we're laying out or what stretches we're doing, what hose packs we run. All that obviously needs to be, the education process has to be there. But if they've got the foundation, that's a piece of cake. That shouldn't be a problem. And like you said, if there's a probationary period, if the guy's a turd, you wash him out. That's how this works. It's in an organization or in a overall fire service that says that we're struggling to get people. God damn, don't make it even harder on ourselves. I just don't get it. And I again, bureaucracy, the more layers of bureaucracy you have, whether it be in local government, state government, especially, it feels like state government. I know here in New Jersey, state government it's very, very tough to deal with in all aspects, every aspect, not just the fire service, but fire service too. So it's some of the rules that come out, you just look at it and you go, you gotta be kidding me. And then you see who made the rule and you go, that was a shitbag in his fire department before he got this bureaucratic position. Now he's going to be up there telling me how to do it when he was scared to stretch a line. Great. Mm-hmm. And it is. There's certainly a bunch of those names I'd love to put on record, but probably shouldn't. But yeah, the reciprocity thing's a big deal. It is. And it's simple. That's a simple fix. These aren't hard problems to address. Again, do you have the will to fix it or don't you? Doesn't seem that hard.
No, this is what I'm realizing. Like, the solutions are simple. You look at the obesity crisis, going back to cooking real food in schools, putting PE programs back in, pedestrianizing downtowns, bolstering local farmers to make that clean food, close to town. The subway system, so people are more prone to be walking around. And there's so many things that are so obvious. And then even with PFAS and all the other stuff, getting away from everything being wrapped in 10 layers of plastic and going, I can go into a grocery store with a cloth bag and put my fruit and vegetables in there. You know what I mean? I mean, everything is just, how did we do it 100 years ago? That will take us 80% of the way. And then which parts of modern medicine and technology are truly advancing our lives? All right, well, let's move the needle on there. So, you've regressed to make the human healthier in the uniform, but then you've advanced through better bunker gear, masks, helmets, etc., to allow us to perform better. But it always comes down to, is it a self-serving thing, or is it truly for the mission itself?
Right.
So again, are you worried about how you look as a firefighter, or are you worried about how you perform as a firefighter?
Yeah, I kind of am worried about both at this point. But food packaging and PFAS, that was something that Dr. Stapleton spoke about yesterday. The amount of PFAS found in so much food packaging, and she said that places like McDonald's, actually, of all places, who cook the unhealthiest shit, and I know I eat too much of it at times, right? But even they said our packaging is a problem because it's we have PFAS that we have these coatings in this. We need to change it, and they've since made it the effort to do that. So, what you might say about RFK, listen, I might not agree with everything, but at least it's on a national stage now, and he's bringing points to light that many of us didn't know about, didn't think about. Whether he's right, wrong, or indifferent, at least the conversations are being had, and now we can debate them. And that's what I like about what's going on in the country today. Lots of things I don't like, but that's definitely one of the things I do like. And we as a fire service need to have these debates and have these honest conversations with one another. We don't have to like each other. Just like in the firehouse, there were guys I worked with that I did not like at all. I tried to respect their opinion until they proved to me that I shouldn't. And I tried to show respect to them as a person until they proved to me I shouldn't. But if we have these open conversations, the will, it's worth doing. And I've been saying this for years. There's two things that mean a lot to me, right? If it's worth doing, it's worth doing passionately. Do it with passion. Everything, my fire service career, I've been way more than I should when it comes to being all in, right? I screwed up a lot of my personal life. Again, I'm very blessed that I got it back, that I still have my kids, that I have a great relationship with both my kids and now my stepson, that I was able to remarry somebody and have so much different relationship. But I had those chances because I was so damn passionate about the fire service. It's all I cared about. It was my ego. It was the fire service. It was all those things. And I believe that you have to be passionate about anything you're going to do to be successful, right? I'm quite sure that all of these very wealthy and very successful folks in industry and business, they didn't go into it half-assed. They went into it both feet. I'm going to make this happen. I'm going to lay it on the line. And the next thing you know, we all know who Elon is, or we all know who love or hate him Bill Gates is, or you know what I mean? They did it with passion. So if you're going to do it, if it's worth doing in your mind, it's worth doing passionately. And that's how the fire service has to be, because it's life and death, yours, and more importantly, somebody else's, right? And the other thing that I really live by, and I don't know that I realized, again, my mom says you can't put an old head on young shoulders. So as I've aged, I don't know if that's an old Yiddish saying or what, but that's her saying. And I think as I've aged, I've understood more that my life should be impactful, right? I shouldn't just coast along. I want to make an impact, and a positive impact, not a negative one. I've made enough negative ones in my life. I want to make a positive impact on people. And my choice and my path for that is clearly the fire service. It's all I know. It's all I've ever done since I was a 14-year-old kid. When I realized I couldn't play Major League Baseball, a 5'8", 150-pound Jewish kid from New Egypt, New Jersey, wasn't making the big leagues. I figured it out, and I became a fireman. I'd love to go back to that 150, 160 range, but I ain't there. and I'm probably shrinking in height too. So, but the goal should be to make an impact, a positive impact. And I think I see guys who are out there on the teaching circuit, young firemen who are getting involved in teaching, who are doing that, right? And I'll even I don't want to pump up their egos too big, but a young guy in Texas named Donovan Carrasco. I watch him and he's so passionate about what he's doing. Doesn't have a ton of experience. Doesn't work in a real busy fire department. Passionate about his family, passionate about what he's doing, passionate about the job, right? And trying to make that positive impact. And I see so many of these guys. You know, that's the blessing of being able to travel around. Look at in Florida what Basil Ibrahim does. My God, what an impactful man he is, and what a passionate person he is. You don't have to agree with everything he says, because when he says it, man, he means it. And you may not always agree with it, but I got to tell you, I look at him and I go, wow, that guy, if he's not inspiring young firemen to be better firemen, and when I say firemen, it's women, it's men. You know, I use that term as a term of endearment. If I don't call you a fireman, then I probably don't like you very much. But I watch him and I go, what an impactful person, right? What a passionate man. What in everything he does, you just see it ooze out of him. And to me, that's the fire service, and that's what we should be. That's what we should aspire to be. And I hope that that's what guys are looking up to. Whether it may not be me, I know I'm in the twilight, but a guy like him, you know, a guy like Donovan, you know, there's so many others. You see some of these other young minds in the fire service. Nick Papa from up in Connecticut, another fabulous guy who does great instruction and has written a book. And these are the folks that when I watch them, I go, yep, they got it. The fire service is in damn good hands, and I'm proud of it. I hope that, you know, I want my son to be that way. My daughter, when whatever she's going into the psychology field. She's just started another new college, going to finish up her bachelor's there, and then move on. And she wants to get involved in research. And I just want her to be passionate about it, and make an impact on somebody's life, make positive impact. That's the way we pay it forward. People gave it to me. I was mentored by great people, and even I learned a lot from shitty people, but I learned more from the great ones. And my job is to pass that on. And what you're doing with thousands of episodes of Behind the Shield, it's impactful, and it's leaving that legacy for them to look at and go and learn from. And it makes the world a better place. We're better for it. I can't make the whole world a better place. I understand my lane, right? My wife says all the time, we always got to stay in our lane, right? She's an amazing field hockey coach, an amazing mentor to these young girls coming through the programs. And I look at it and I'm so proud of what I see. I'm proud of what I see with my kids, how successful they are. I'm staying in my lane in the fire service. It's what I know. Whether I'm okay at it, I've made a career out of this long, and I'm blessed.
Absolutely. I want to go to some quick closing questions. I think you asked you them before. It'd be interesting to see if it's changed a little bit in the last few years. Yeah. The first one I'd love to ask, is there a book or are there books that you love to recommend? It can be related to our discussion today or completely unrelated.
Goodness. You know, I don't read as much as I should. I try to read on the planes, and I'm flying a lot. And I've varied it up. I like to read a lot of military history type stuff. Although right now I've been sitting on the beach reading the history of the 1980 World Champion Phillies. So that's been my passion here lately. I think there's a lot of good leadership stuff out there, some self-leadership stuff. It's funny, I go back to a lot. It's Our Ship and It's Your Ship, you know, the Abramashov stuff. I really like those. I think those are good for aspiring people coming up. I think if you're studying and you want to be a student of the fire service, it's hard to believe the man's in his 90s, but Vinny Dunn is still pumping out books and they're still applicable. So, you know, he and Chief Norman's books, when I look at a young fireman who should be studying, I would certainly look at that. I would look at Anthony Avillo's books for studying. If you want to understand strategies and tactics, I think they're very, very good. Um, but yeah, man, there's another one called Dirty Work, I believe it is. I believe that's what it was called, and it was a leadership book from a guy who worked. He was a Fed. He was in law enforcement, federal law enforcement, and he grew up in West Virginia. And I believe it's Dirty Work. It's literally on my bookshelf right near my desk at home. And I gave that to all my officers when I was the chief, because I wanted them to read his idea on leadership and how to run basically small groups and so forth. And I think that's a really good one. I'd have to look it up again. And honestly, I just finished reading your book, and I had read the first one and thoroughly enjoyed it, but I just read the second one. And I got to go on Amazon and Google and all that stuff and put a review in, because I got to tell you, um, that's an impactful book. It made me think about things I did wrong in my career, in my life, in my personal life, things I didn't even realize were probably caused by whatever I was dealing with at work, and I was taking it out on everybody else. Um, the suicidal ideation, everything, it was all there. Um, but honestly, it made me think a lot. And I've recommended that. I recommended it to my son. I've recommended it to a lot of people. So I thank you for that, because that's something that I would absolutely recommend.
Yeah, well, I appreciate it.
And I hope the next project with it really takes off, because that'll be so freaking cool.
Yeah, no, the TV show, there's a lot of irons in the fire, because this is the thing. I mean, I wanted to write a book for the readers, but ultimately knowing how hard it was for me to read when I was in it, sleep deprived and, stressed and single father and all that.
Yeah.
The Netflix, the streaming world is so good now. So yeah, I'm super excited to get this on screens. I think it will be, the story itself will be something that will hopefully be a mirror to whoever's watching, and then there's going to be a parallel project that's going to provide almost like behind the scenes real world solutions, so that the person's not just watching a show, there'll be this other thing after where they're like, oh, so I can do something about the thing that I'm really struggling with. And that's never been done before. So I'm going to keep it a little cryptic there, but so I don't give it all away.
Yeah.
But, my thing is, like I said, reverse 1984, what if you use the very screen that was being used to divide us recently to actually start healing us? So, the story is the hook, and I've had so many people say, I got to chapter 4 and I had to put it down, go to counseling, whatever. And it wasn't that it traumatized them. Like you said, it brought things up, and that's amazing.
It did.
So
it did. There were times where I had to close it and wipe some tears and, all right, I'll read again in a couple days, but it not, I won't say no books do that for me, because some do. There was actually a little chapter. I read Tulsi Gabbard's book the other day while I was on the beach. And one of the stories that hit me really hard was, she talked about one of the first soldiers that she lost when she was in Iraq, and he was an American Samoan sergeant. And if you know anything about the Samoan people, I'm very blessed. I get to go there every couple of years and train them. But this gentleman, he was a sergeant in the Army, and was killed, obviously, in line of duty in Iraq. But when she was describing it and describing his family and describing some of the relationships, it just opened something up that I didn't know was there. And same thing, I'm like, all right, I'm going to go jump in the ocean now and chill out a little bit, maybe swim a little bit, and think twice about it. So
yeah, it's powerful. I mean, I think if you can do that with written word on a page, then you have a scene with good acting and good, stunts and special effects and the music behind it, and you're less likely to close that book if you're watching a show. I think you just kind of, soldier on. I'm excited about the potential. So we shall see.
awesome.
It will happen. All right. Well, speaking of that, what about films and documentaries that you love?
Oh man, I love. I've always enjoyed watching war movies or military type movies. So obviously the Band of Brothers stuff and Flags of Our Fathers. I use some Flags of Our Fathers stuff in one of my presentations that I do. talking about teamwork and brotherhood and things of that nature. I really did enjoy that. I like a lot of stupid slapstick stuff from the 80s just because that's my 12-year-old personality still. So I can still watch, Animal House and the Blues Brothers and Smokey and the Bandit and laugh like a little kid and recite all the lines. We used to any probie we had come in the firehouse after dinner. We made them watch one of those movies every night. So this way they would understand half the shit we were saying in the rig. Yeah, and I like some of the old classics. Casablanca is still one of my favorites. Oh, taking in more work.
Second time. There we go. That's just over 2 hours.
Yeah.
Brilliant. All right. Well, the next question, is there a person that you recommend to come on this podcast as a guest to speak to the first responders, military, and associated professions of the world?
So, yeah, I'll tell you a guy who is one of the most dynamic people I know and one of my dearest friends in the world. And that's a gentleman named Carl Haddon. And I think you and he would really hit it off. He's an incredibly humble fellow who now lives out in the Rocky Mountains of Idaho and still does a lot of training, still writes for Fire Engineering and Fire Rescue Magazine. But he was Roger Penske's right-hand man at Penske Racing, and then became basically the chief of safety for NASCAR for a long time. Grew up in California. There's not much he didn't do when it comes to the entertainment industry. He's done it all, met them all. I mean, literally, just one of the most dear friends that my family has, and tremendous fire service educator to this day. Again, really passionate, really bright, one of the most well-rounded people I've ever met. And I can tell you some cool stories about some entertainers that he had a lot of interaction with over the years. Pretty awesome.
I was scrolling. Sorry, I was going to say, I was scrolling through my messages and I saw that you'd recommended that when we spoke last, which is probably 2-3 years ago. So I've still got that contact in my phone. So I need to take this as a sign to actually make that connection. So if you see him, you're able to let him know that I'll be, reaching out. I'd love to get him on.
Yeah, I definitely would. And I mean, there's so many great people in the emergency services today that are doing so many great things. But I think his perspective is pretty cool. He sees the big picture beyond what others see, and I know he's reined me in on a lot of stuff in my life. So, yeah.
Fantastic. All right. Well, the last question before everyone knows where they can find you and On Scene Training Associates. What do you do to decompress these days?
So my wife has been really helping me, as she's standing over here, has helped me with this, right? So I became a scuba diver several years ago. Not a very confident one, but got my open water cert down in Cozumel, and we've dove now in the Keys and Hawaii, and our last trip was to Roatan, Honduras. So we don't do it as much as certainly she wants to, or I'd like to, but working on that a little more. And I've taken golf back up again, which I don't know if that decompresses me or makes me stress worse because I suck. But again, she's a very good golfer, so she's got patience with me. But I enjoy it, right? It's time away from the fire service. It's time out in nature. It's testing me. It's making me do some physical things, getting good exercise in, and some time, that we can be alone and enjoy something together, not tied to our professions. So those have been the two, probably the biggest things. Trying to get back to the gym, which has not been easy, but I'm committing myself to getting back to that a little more, to decompress and feel a little better about myself. And really that's kind of it, that those are my keys right now. But, I'm very fortunate.
Brilliant. Well, I'm sure she's next to you wondering why this conversation's taken 2.5 hours. So let's give you the final question. So people listening, where can they find you and On Scene Training?
We're on all the social medias, on Instagram and Facebook. I don't use X that much because I just don't think about it that often. But LinkedIn, you can find me on there. On Scene Training is just www.onscenetraining.com. And we're very fortunate. You can reach us at any of those places. I put up a lot of stuff on our social media when I can, and share a lot of other people's that I think is really good stuff, and certainly give them all the credit. But yeah, that's it. And we're at a lot of the conferences. In fact, I have a big gang of my guys right now at the Jimmy Ellis conference in Pittsburgh. They're doing RIT under fire basically stuff this weekend, and we're doing all fall. We're going to be booked pretty solid. And you can find us at the Joey Dean Memorial Foundation conferences. The first week, I believe it's like the 6th, 7th, 8th, something like that, in November in Long Island. For any fireman who wants to get hands-on training and rub elbows with some of the greatest people I've ever met, that's a good one, and it's very inexpensive considering. If you can get yourself there, hotels aren't terrible, and I think the courses for the weekend are maybe like $300 or $350 for a whole weekend. So it's really well done, and all about that foundation. And then we'll do it again in Houston in I'm sure it'll be March or somewhere in there. So, yep.
Fantastic. Well, I want to thank you again. We've, as I said, talked for 2.5 hours. I could talk for another 2.5 hours. It's such a, powerful perspective. I mean, I spent a very short career in the fire service, 14 years, but yours, as you said, from 14 years old to now, I mean, that's a hell of a career, and you've got the volunteer and the career perspective. So I want to thank you so much for yet again coming on the Behind the Shield podcast, being so generous with your time. And thank you.
It's an absolute honor to be back with you. And I really admire everything you've done and what you continue to do. Thank you for all the things.